Chapter 10:25. It was as if a volcano that had been dormant for thousands of years had accumulated an enormous amount of power and was about to erupt. An incomparably tyrannical aura gushed out from Chu Mu's body, causing the air to flow chaotically and the surrounding seals to creak as if they were about to collapse. Bawang was alarmed. Looking at Chu Mu, he was immediately delighted. He knew that Chu Mu's strength had become even more powerful. The tyrannical sword Yuan was surging in his meridians, surging like waves, endless like a great river flowing east. An incomparably carefree feeling surged throughout his body, causing Chu Mu to have the impulse to soar into the sky and roar to the sky. But he forcibly suppressed this impulse. Doing so in such a place would undoubtedly attract firepower, which was very unwise. Forcibly suppressing the carefree feeling, Chu Mu wholeheartedly controlled the more tyrannical sword Yuan, constantly circulating it in his body. After one great cycle after another, he gradually mastered it. Generally speaking, when one's cultivation base had just broken through, due to the surge in sword Yuan, one's control would be greatly reduced. It would take some time to readjust and completely master it. Chu Mu was in this process. After a full 24 great cycles, Chu Mu finally regained control of the skyrocketing sword Yuan and was able to control it as he wished. The majestic sword Yuan was injected into his dantian, forming a sword Yuan lake. Chu Mu once again operated the hidden edge technique, and his tyrannical aura began to converge until it was difficult to detect. Getting up and breaking the many seals, Chu Mu moved his hands and feet. He only felt that the strength of his body seemed to have increased due to the impact of the sword Yuan after his cultivation base had broken through. He did not know if it was an illusion, but every movement of his was filled with tyrannical power, and the power of his divine sense was also much more tyrannical. With my current strength, I should be able to easily kill an ordinary third-level sword chi spirit. Even if I face an elite third-level sword chi spirit, I should be able to fight and kill it. Chu Mu thought to himself. However, I actually used up all 249 low-grade true origin fruits before I was able to break through. If I had a third-grade cultivation talent, I might not even need 200 true origin fruits to successfully break through. He thought to himself, and could not help but feel helpless about his low cultivation talent. Perhaps I can find more vital essence fruits in the vital essence secret realm, and raise my cultivation base to the third sky of fate realm in a short period of time. Chu Mu thought and could not help but feel somewhat expectant. If he cultivated normally in the outside world, it would take him decades to cultivate to the third sky of fate realm. But if he had enough vital essence fruits, he could raise his cultivation base to in a short period of time. The increase in cultivation base was not only a direct increase in the power of the sword origin, but also an increase in the quantity of the sword origin. That not only meant that the power of the sword skills would be stronger, but it also meant that he could perform more sword skills, and even higher grade sword skills. In short, the increase in sword origin was very important. It was one of the symbols of a swordsman's strength, and it was indispensable. Another important point was that if Chu Mu could obtain more vital essence fruits, it would undoubtedly save a lot of time to cultivate sword origin. He could use this time to understand and master the transformation of the laws, and strive to master the original sword skills again. His strength would increase in a straight line. Full of motivation, Chu Mu continued to move forward with Bawang. He did not have any specific goal, and he only wanted to move forward, continuously move forward, and search for more powerful sword chi spirits and more vital essence fruit. Master, watch my Bawang's triple combo. Bawang shouted in a low voice. Swish, swish, swish. The whip sword in his hand instantly swung, and the extremely sharp tip pierced through the void like a sharp awl that could pierce through all hard objects. The three moves of one sword formed a straight line. The three consecutive strikes hit the same spot on the sword chi spirit's head. These three strikes all contained the power of the rule of gold, and were incomparably sharp. They also contained the explosive power of the tyrant's tyrannical body. They were as powerful as thunder. This was the first sword technique that the tyrant had created after many battles. This ordinary first-level sword chi spirit was instantly defeated by Bawang's triple combo. At the same time, Chu Mu also killed his opponent, an ordinary second-level sword chi spirit. Chu Mu's cultivation had reached the early stage of the second heaven of creation realm, and he had become a 2-star sword of Gojoseon. His strength had increased tremendously, and even an ordinary third-level sword chi spirit was no match for Chu Mu, not to mention an ordinary second-level sword chi spirit. Currently, only an elite third-level sword chi spirit could give Chu Mu some pressure. Every sword of Gojoseon that entered the vital essence realm was fighting. Some sword of Gojoseon were killed in battle, either by the sword chi spirit's attack or by the other sword of Gojoseon's sword. Fighting for benefits was always the mainstream. Chu Mu tried his best to avoid meeting with the other sword kings. He didn't want to waste time on fighting for benefit. Instead, he wanted to spend more time fighting with the sword aura spirits and improving his sword technique. In front of them, a group of sword chi spirits gathered, causing Chu Mu and Bawang to stop moving forward. The powerful aura caused Chu Mu to feel shocked. With a glance, he locked onto the target of the powerful aura emitting from the group of sword aura spirits. A purple and red sword chi spirit intertwined with each other. The purple and red lines looked like some kind of mysterious power tattooed on the body of the sword chi spirit. A terrifying aura rippled through the air. The air around the purple and red sword chi spirit intertwined to form a mysterious pattern seemed to be squeezed out. The aura fluctuation of a third-level sword chi spirit. Chu Mu could clearly feel it from afar. He muttered to himself, "The purple lines are the power of the rule of thunder, and the red lines are the power of the rule of fire. Only an elite third-level sword chi spirit can master the rule of thunder or fire. But this third-level sword chi spirit has mastered 2 types of rule power." Chu Mu could not help but recall the introduction of sword chi spirits that Lu Zhongliao had explained earlier. The special rule of the vital energy secret realm limited the cultivation of those who entered. They could not exceed the third sky of creation realm, and the highest was the peak of the third sky of creation realm. Therefore, the highest level a sword chi spirit could reach was the third level, or the peak of the third level. Of course, some swordsmen had special cultivation methods, which led to their sword origin being denser than other swordsmen of the same level. Similarly, there were differences in strength between sword chi spirits of the same level. The quantity and quality of sword chi possessed by a powerful sword chi spirit would be greater than other sword chi spirits of the same level. The aura fluctuation of this third-level sword chi spirit with purple and red colors was more powerful than an ordinary third-level sword chi spirit. In addition to the powerful rule power of the rule of thunder and the rule power of fire, it was extremely terrifying. A sword chi spirit that grasped 2 types of rule power was defined as a commander-level sword chi spirit. A sword chi spirit that grasped 3 types of rule power was defined as a monarch-level sword chi spirit. Legend had it that a sword chi spirit that grasped 4 types of rule power was defined as a monarch-level sword chi spirit. As for whether there were sword chi spirits that grasped more than 4, 5, or even 6 types of rule power, Chu Mu did not know. At least since the opening of the vital energy secret realm, it had never appeared. Even an emperor-level sword chi spirit had only appeared 3 times in the thousands of years since the opening of the vital energy secret realm. Even a monarch-level sword chi spirit rarely appeared. To be able to encounter a commander-level third-level sword chi spirit, he did not know whether he was lucky or unlucky. If compared to a swordsman, the sword chi spirit grasped very little rule power. Even the extremely rare emperor-level sword chi spirit only grasped 4 types of rule power. On the other hand, Most of the sword of Gojoseon that entered the vital energy secret realm had grasped at least 4 types of rule power. There were even 5, 6, or even 7 types of rule power. However, the rule power that swordsmen and sword chi spirits grasped was different. To put it simply, the rule power that a swordsman grasped was not directly related to the strength of his strength. This was because after grasping the rule power, one still had to be proficient in using it. Only after grasping the rule power could one turn it into strength. One had to go through the stages of grasping, familiarizing, mastering, and controlling. In order to fuse the rule power and use it at the same time, one had to have enough strength to support it in addition to grasping the rule power. In other words, one had to use sword energy and divine thought power as a carrier. Sword chi spirits were different. Once they grasped any rule power, they would immediately reach the level of controlling it. They would be able to fully utilize the power of the rule power. For example, if an elite-level sword chi spirit possessed a certain rule power, it would be able to fully utilize the power of the rule power. If a commander-level sword chi spirit possessed 2 types of rule power, it would be able to fully utilize the power of the rule power. It would also be able to fuse the 2 types of rule power as it pleased. By the same logic, a monarch-rank spirit of sword chi could control 3 types of power of laws at will, while an emperor-rank spirit of sword chi could control 4 types of power of laws at will, unleashing 100% of its power. It was terrifying just thinking about it. A Samsung sword of Gojoseon could perform an Earth-tier rank 4 sword skill, but it would consume a lot of sword energy and spiritual sense. At most, it could only perform 2 to 4 times before it had to be replenished. On the other hand, an Emperor-level sword chi spirit could perform an Earth-tier rank 4 sword skill without any restrictions. What kind of situation would that be? A rank 4 sword of Gojoseon was a mainstream sword skill. It was the strongest sword skill that most sword of Gojoseon could master. As his thoughts drifted away, Chumu gathered his thoughts and stared at the commander-level level 3 sword chi spirit as he pondered. Every attack of a commander-level level 3 sword chi spirit had the power of an Earth-tier rank 2 sword skill. Would he be able to fight it? Passing by the group of hundreds of sword chi spirits, Chumu saw a low-grade true yuan tree. There were many low-grade true yuan fruits on it. Roughly counting, there were more than 300 fruit. Chumu's pupils shrank. Right at this moment, an excited voice came from another direction. Chapter 10:26. So many true elemental fruits. Kill that group of sword chi spirits. Excited shouts came from afar. Chumu and Bawang, who were restraining their auras, turned their heads to look. They saw 8 figures flying through the air. Before they arrived, their swords had already been unsheathed. Dazzling rays of light tore through the sky, accompanied by sharp, ear-piercing noises. Sword skills were displayed one after another. It was as if thunder had descended from the heavens, like a torrent, bombarding the group of hundreds of sword chi spirits. As soon as the 8 sword of Gojoseon attacked, they immediately angered the group of sword chi spirits. Sword chi condensed, and tyrannical sword chi broke through the air. Hundreds of sword chi spirits, all of them were level 3 sword chi spirit. There was 1 commander-level sword chi spirit, 6 elite-level sword chi spirits, and the rest were ordinary-level sword chi spirit. Such a lineup was already very powerful. Sword skills and sword chi collided. Under the collision, an earth-shattering, terrifying energy exploded. The earth crumbled. In the distance, Chumu and Bawang were also hit by the hurricane. Their robes fluttered, but because they were far away and had restrained their auras as much as possible, they weren't discovered. Chumu also planned to take this opportunity to see the level 3 commander-level sword chi spirit's strength. He wanted to see how tyrannical it was. The 3rd rank commander rank sword aura spirit waved its arm, and the surrounding sword aura spirits immediately moved. They seemed to form a formation, causing Chumu to be slightly shocked. Could it be that the intelligence of a commander-level sword chi spirit had reached such a high level? It was impossible for a sword chi spirit that only had instincts. A sword chi spirit that had intelligence and grasped a terrifying power was even more terrifying. Fortunately, the commander-level sword chi spirit's intelligence was limited. Therefore, the formation it formed was very rough. The strength of the 8th sword of Gojosian was also not to be underestimated. With cooperation, they charged into the group of sword chi spirit. One of them was very ferocious. With one sword, he could kill an ordinary level 3 sword chi spirit. At least a 5-star sword of Gojosian, or even a 6-star sword of Gojosian. Looking at the ferocious figure, Chumu thought to himself, why wasn't it an advanced sword of Gojosian? Very simple. There were only a dozen advanced sword of Gojosian that had entered the vital energy secret realm, and Chumu remembered them all. Although this intermediate sword of Gojosian's cultivation was suppressed to the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer of creation realm, the quality of his sword energy was better than an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian. The power of his divine sense was also stronger than an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian. In addition, his understanding and mastery of the power of rules was also above an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian. His strength was very terrifying. Among these 8 sword of Gojosian, the other 7 were all Samsung sword of Gojosian. The real Samsung sword of Gojosian was proficient in cooperation. However, the sword chi spirits were not to be trifled with either. A battle of life and death began. In terms of numbers, the sword chi spirits were obviously more than 10 times more. Although the intermediate sword of Gojosian was ferocious, it was still blocked by the commander-level sword of Gojosian in the end. As soon as it was blocked, the 8 people's cooperation was immediately interrupted. The 6 elite level 3 sword chi spirits each fought one of the 8 people, immediately causing the 8 sword chi spirits to fight on their own. Their combined strength was naturally stronger, but once they were separated and fought on their own, their strength decreased by more than a few percent. First, Chumu looked at the battle between the elite level 3 sword chi spirit. Then, his gaze focused on the commander level 3 sword chi spirit. What exquisite swordsmanship! After just a few glances, Chumu sighed in admiration. The swordsmanship mastered by the sword chi spirits was of the same origin. However, the stronger the sword chi spirit was, the more perfect and exquisite its swordsmanship would be. Every sword would be more exquisite and powerful. Even Chumu was shocked by the commander level 3 sword chi spirit's swordsmanship. Although the intermediate sword of Gojosian was strong, under the attacks of the commander-level sword chi spirit, it gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. A blood-curdling scream sounded. One of the Samsung sword of Gojosian was cut into pieces by several sword chi spirit. This was because the sword chi spirits were not only the commander-level sword chi spirit and the 6 elite level 3 sword chi spirit. There were also dozens of normal level 3 sword chi spirit. Once their numbers increased, they could not be underestimated. The appearance of the first death alarmed the others. Soon, the second Samsung sword of Gojosian was killed. With the death of the sword of Gojosian, the elite level 3 sword chi spirits were free. They surrounded and attacked the other Samsung sword of Gojosian. Soon, another 2 Samsung sword of Gojosian died on the spot. 8 people came excitedly, but 4 of them died. This made the remaining people's faces turn green. The opponents are too strong. Retreat. That intermediate sword king suddenly erupted with power. After pushing back the commander-level sword chi spirit with a single sword strike, he quickly pulled himself back, soared into the sky, and desperately fled into the distance. The other 3 Samsung sword of Gojosian also exploded with power. They used their secret techniques to forcefully increase their strength. After repelling their opponents, they flew into the sky and escaped. They did not use their secret techniques before because they planned to use them at the most critical moment. They did not expect that they had underestimated the strength of these sword chi spirit. Out of the 8 people who had come, 4 had died, and the remaining 4 had fled in panic. The commander grade sword chi spirits and the other sword chi spirits all started to attack. Terrifying chi swords tore through the air, and even though they didn't kill the 4 of them, they were still heavily injured. It seemed that this group of sword chi spirits was guarding the Zhen Yuan tree. Therefore, they did not chase after them. Otherwise, the 4 sword of Gojoseon might not have been able to escape. 1 commander level 3 sword chi spirit, 6 elite level 3 sword chi spirits, 20 normal level 3 sword chi spirits. Chumu pondered. The power of the sword chi spirits was too horrifying. Once a swordsman was hit, he would be injured. It would not be easy for him to recover once he was injured. However, the sword chi spirits could recover quickly. As long as they were not defeated, they could quickly return to their peak state. That alone made them difficult to kill. An intermediate sword of Gojoseon and 4 other Samsung sword of Gojoseon died. However, they only managed to kill dozens of normal level 3 sword chi spirit. In the end, they fled in panic. Chumu did not think that he was stronger than them. However, he was unwilling to give up on the more than 300 Zhen Yuan fruit. What should he do? Bawang was also waiting for Chumu's decision. He was only a beast king. Powerful and belligerent, he knew that with his current strength, rushing into the group of sword chi spirits was tantamount to suicide. How good would it be if I could fight one-on-one with that commander level 3 sword chi spirit? Chumu thought to himself. However, there were other sword chi spirits nearby. With Bawang's strength, there was no way he could restrain them. He would be brutally dismembered in an instant. Just look at the disfigured corpses on the ground. His thoughts turned rapidly, one idea after another. Using the divine desolate sword art will increase the power of the sword chi by 10 times. The power of the sword chi will be comparable to the normal Samsung sword of Gojoseon. Using Deshang's burning blood transformation will increase my strength by 3 times. It will be comparable to the powerful Samsung sword of Gojoseon. Chu Mu silently calculated his strength after using the sword chi spirit. In this state, if I use the immortal sword intent and the power of law, and use the earth tremor to the extreme, it will be enough to kill any ordinary level 3 sword chi spirit. Even an elite level 3 sword chi spirit would not be able to block one strike from me. His brain rapidly worked. In his mental world, all the terrain and sword aura spirits in front of him were simulated. Chu Mu began to use his powerful soul ability to deduce the virtual battle situation and simulate it. Continuous simulation, continuous calculation. Every step, every dodge, every attack trajectory, everything was calculated in detail. There could not be the slightest deviation. Every sword chi spirit's counterattack, their movement, the trajectory of their sword chi spirit's attack, and so on, Chu Mu had to fully consider and integrate them into the simulation, into his simulated battle. The 6 elite level 3 sword chi spirits, and the most important commander level 3 sword chi spirit. Bawang did not speak. He could also see that Chu Mu was in a strange state. His eyes became dark and deep, as if they could swallow everything in the world. Nothing could escape from them. It was extremely terrifying. Cold, emotionless, mysterious, and profound. His mind force and spiritual force were constantly consumed, but Chu Mu did not notice. He continued to simulate and calculate, and whenever he made a mistake, he would immediately restart. Chu Mu rarely did this kind of simulation because the burden was too great. Moreover, he failed time and time again. Whenever he reached a certain point, he would be killed by the sword chi spirit. Today, he had no choice but to do this unless he wanted to give up on the 300+ true essence fruit. Chu Mu was very clear that he was not a sword chi spirit. He did not have the ability to continuously recover as long as it was not destroyed. Ability to continuously recover? A thought flashed through his mind. Chu Mu's deep eyes suddenly lit up as he thought of the wood aspect in his body. The vigorous vitality could increase his self-healing ability by tens or even hundreds of times. Light injuries could be healed in just a few breaths. It did not affect his strength, and he could also rapidly recover from serious injuries. This was also one of his advantages, one of his abilities. He had to add it into the simulation. After adding in his powerful self-healing ability, Chu Mu's simulation progress increased by a lot, and he was no longer stuck. Time slowly passed, and the sword chi spirits regained their calm. There were only 4 broken corpses and a pool of blood left on the ground, indicating that there had been a battle and death. In the distance, 2 figures were hiding. They had restrained their auras, making them seem like inanimate objects that were difficult to discover. Bit by bit, he deduced. Although it was slow, there was still progress. Gradually, Chu Mu's eyes became deep, dark, and mysterious again, absorbing all the light. In the simulation, Bawang was naturally considered. How could he share some of the pressure for Chu Mu without being seriously injured or dying? Suddenly, Chu Mu's eyes shot out an intense light. At the same time, an indifferent voice entered Bawang's ears. It was said in the most concise and clear way, allowing Bawang to understand. Just as he finished speaking, Chu Mu used the Divine Wilderness Sword Art, compressing his tyrannical sword essence into Divine Wilderness Sword Essence. He took out the Blood Yang pill and kept it in his mouth. Then, he used Deshang's Burning Blood Transformation. Chapter 10:27. The tyrannical rules of lightning merged with the divine desolate sword energy, instantly releasing an incomparably tyrannical power into his legs. His legs slightly bent, the muscles on his thighs were like rocks, the muscles on his calves instantly swelled up, the veins protruding. Every muscle was vibrating at a high speed, the earthquake was activated at the same time. Accompanied by the sound of electric arcs, purple-colored lightning condensed and exploded under Chu Mu's feet. The soles of his feet fiercely stomped on the hard ground, and a shocking explosion rang out. Amidst the splashing of dirt, Chu Mu's body was like a cannonball that left the barrel. With an incomparably powerful posture, he streaked across a purple-colored lightning, tearing apart the vast sky as he charged straight towards the group of sword aura spirits. 2 holes were blasted open on the ground. Chu Mu's entire body was wrapped in purple lightning arcs and pale red blood light. They intertwined to form a purple-red light shadow, falling down from the sky like a meteor. Dragging a dozen-meter-long flame tail, it burned the void and left a long trail behind, as if plowing through space. When Chu Mu moved, the group of sword chi spirits immediately felt it. However, Chu Mu, who was fully prepared and adjusted to his peak state, instantly exploded with his tyrannical power, exploding with his fastest speed, like a bolt of lightning splitting the sky. His right hand held the violent thunder sacred sword tightly, and his left hand held a low-grade sacred sword. With both swords in hand, in an instant, he crossed the sky and charged into the group of sword chi spirit. When Chu Mu burst out, Bawang also burst out. He used his bloodline secret technique to increase his strength and speed, and was only slightly slower than Chu Mu. He rushed towards the sword chi spirit. Without hesitation, without mercy, his hands danced, sweeping past 2 ordinary level 3 sword chi spirit. The earthquake was activated, and the high-frequency vibrations directly bombarded the 2 level 3 sword chi spirits, causing their bodies to tremble. With 2 bangs, they exploded and dissipated. The 2 swords formed a cross, and with an even more ferocious momentum, he charged towards a level 3 elite sword chi spirit like lightning. That level 3 elite sword chi spirit was about to react, but it was already hit by Chu Mu. It felt as if it was hit by a meteor. The level 3 elite sword chi spirit trembled, and from the middle it exploded, turning into a storm of chi that filled the sky and dust filled the air. After insta-killing an elite 3rd rank sword aura spirit, Chu Mu's ferocious momentum was also blocked. It slowed down for a moment and didn't have the same indomitable ferocity. Everything was within his expectations. Chu Mu had already simulated it. Without hesitation, he switched to wind rule and merged it into his body. Immediately, he became as light as the wind. Like a gust of wind, he quickly flew to the side. The two swords retracted, and then suddenly shot out, creating two dazzling sword light, tearing the sky and creating two perfect arcs. Under the earthquake, another two ordinary level 3 sword chi spirits were scattered by Chu Mu's swords. Chu Mu's body made a turn in the air, dodging a few slashes of sword chi, and flew back like a swallow. He swept past the two ordinary level 3 sword chi spirits, and killed them once again. In an instant, the wind precepts switched to the void precepts. His body turned from light to ethereal, drifting erratically as if he had become one with the surrounding space. With a thought, he dodged the attack of the level 3 commander level sword chi spirit and appeared behind an ordinary level 3 sword chi spirit, waving both swords. Chu Mu's plan was to first get rid of the 20 normal 3rd rank sword aura spirits, then get rid of the 6 elite 3rd rank sword aura spirit. He could go through them and finally leave behind the commander 3rd rank sword aura spirit. Bawang also rushed up. After using the secret bloodline technique, his strength had increased greatly, and his tyrannical attack power could allow him to kill an ordinary level 3 sword chi spirit in a short time. Chu Mu did not need Bawang to be strong, and only needed to share a little of the pressure. Kill, kill, kill. Under the void rule, Chu Mu's body appeared everywhere as if he was teleporting. One after another, ordinary level 3 sword chi spirits died under his sword. It was incomparably fierce and incomparably carefree. This kind of unrestrained attack with all his strength was simply too satisfying. Vaguely, Chu Mu felt as if he had touched something, and as long as he used his strength, he would be able to pierce through it and see a whole new world. Finally, 18 ordinary level 3 sword chi spirits died under Chu Mu's sword, one died under Bawang's whip sword, and one was in a fierce battle with Bawang. Chu Mu did not hesitate, nor did he stop. His two swords spread out like an eagle's wings, causing his speed to increase, and disappeared in an instant, just in time to avoid the sword chi attack of the level 3 commander sword chi spirit. He appeared behind an elite level 3 sword chi spirit, and his two swords danced wildly, forming a sword chi storm. The fierce slash directly cut the elite level 3 sword chi spirit into pieces, killing it. There were still 4 elite level 3 sword chi spirits and 1 commander level 3 sword chi spirit. The pressure on Chu Mu was still very big. The 4 elite level 3 sword chi spirits worked together under the command of the commander sword chi spirit, increasing the difficulty. Chu Mu didn't dare to stop in the slightest, because he knew that the moment he stopped, the thunder-sweeping acupuncture point aura that he had condensed before would greatly decrease. Therefore, even if he had to risk being struck by the elite 3rd level sword chi spirit's chi sword, Chu Mu didn't dare to stop and counterattack. His treasured clothing was broken, and a long wound was torn open on his back. Blood instantly sprayed out. Fortunately, the protective sword aura, treasured clothing, and inner armor weakened the power of the chi sword. His powerful body greatly increased Chu Mu's defense. Otherwise, this sword would have been enough to split open Chu Mu's body. This sword was also within Chu Mu's calculations. The aspect of Wood's origin surged with vigorous vitality, spreading to the wound on his back. The numbing itch immediately stopped the bleeding, and the wound also quickly healed. Chu Mu did not seem to feel the slightest bit of pain, and continued to attack without fear of death. 3 elite level 3 sword chi spirits. 2 elite level 3 sword chi spirits. Chu Mu was once again injured, but he still resisted and continued to attack. 1 elite level 3 sword chi spirit. Kill. In the end, there was only 1 commander level 3 sword chi spirit left, and Bawang was at the side. It was hard to imagine that Chu Mu, a 2-star sword of Gojoseon, actually killed 18 ordinary level 3 sword chi spirits and 6 elite level 3 sword chi spirits by himself, directly facing a commander level 3 sword chi spirit. If this scene was seen by any other sword of Gojosian, they would either try to befriend Chu-Mu, or try to kill Chu-Mu. It was too terrifying. Chu-Mu knew that he was able to reach this step, other than the fact that before he attacked, he had gone through numerous simulations to calculate the various routes, the trajectory and timing of his attack, the opponent's reaction, and so on. How powerful was his deduction ability, and how powerful was his soul. That kind of burden was not something Chu-Mu was willing to endure a second time. Other than that, there were also various things he could rely on. The top Divine Realm Imperishable Sword Intent, the top Divine Realm Rule Force, the Divine Desolate Sword Technique, Deshang's Burning Blood Transformation, and his incomparably exquisite and unfathomable sword skills. With 2 swords in hand, and the vigorous vitality of the aspect of wood, as well as a powerful self-healing ability, all these aspects were indispensable. In this state, Chu-Mu could kill any ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian in a split second, and even an ordinary 4-star sword of Gojosian was not his opponent. He could even contend with a powerful 4-star sword of Gojosian. Even so, Chu-Mu was injured 4 times, and each time, the wounds were so deep that his bones could be seen. If not for the aspect of wood's powerful vitality and self-healing ability, the current Chu-Mu would already be in a half-crippled state. Facing the tyrannical 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit, there was only one path left for him, death. Facing the powerful 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit, Chu-Mu's body merged with the Wind Rule Force, and his lithe figure fluttered like the wind, doing his best to dodge the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit's attacks. He needed some time to recover from his injuries. Only when his injuries were healed would he be able to compete with the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit. In a battle between experts, any weakness would lead to an even greater disadvantage. After a series of fierce battles, Chu-Mu's sword chi was nearly depleted. Without hesitation, he activated the innate ability that he had not used for a long time, Spirit Devour. Immediately, a whistling sound rang out, and the heaven-earth Yuan Qi within a radius of several tens of thousands of meters surged over, transforming into a white river that rushed into Chu-Mu's body, transforming into divine desolate sword chi. In less than 10 breaths of time, Chu-Mu's divine desolate sword chi had completely recovered, and his spiritual sense had also recovered a little. After swallowing the blood yang pill, Deshang continued to use the burning blood transformation. A sword light flew out from his interspatial ring, and Deshang used the imperial sword technique to counterattack. The sword light contained the indestructible sword intent, divine desolate sword chi, and metal rule force. It was extremely sharp, and every sword brought about a threat to the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit. As for Chu-Mu, while dodging, he was constantly recovering from his injuries. After another 10 breaths of time, the last of his injuries had healed, and it did not affect his battle. The 2 swords instantly slashed out, and in a breath of time, dozens of sword light intertwined and shot out, bombarding the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit's body. However, the majority of the sword light was blocked by its sword chi, and only a dozen or so sword light struck its body, causing some injuries. Its origin chi dissipated, but was quickly replenished. As if it was enraged by Chu-Mu, the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit's sword chi swept out, and the terrifying sword chi formed an arc that broke through the air, flying past, and even the ground seemed to be scraped open. Chu-Mu had no choice but to dodge the attack, and from top to bottom, the 2 swords joined together and fell like a meteor. The Imperial Sword Technique's sword light circled around, and slashed from the side. Facing Chu-Mu's attack, the 3rd-grade Commander Sword Chi Spirit displayed its incomparably tyrannical strength. Its exquisite and peerless sword techniques seemed to be able to control the surrounding space, and every sword was like an Earth-tier 2nd-grade earth-breaking sword technique. Chu-Mu did not dare to take it head-on, and could only dodge and counterattack. The power of his spiritual sense was once again consumed, and Chu-Mu was delighted to see this. Once again, He observed and comprehended the exquisite and peerless sword techniques of the third-grade commander Sword Chi spirit in the midst of battle. Bawang looked around, and with a movement of his body, he immediately burst forth with full speed, flying towards the low-grade True Yuan tree. He planned to first pluck all the True Yuan fruits on the True Yuan tree before anything else. Bawang's actions were detected by the third-grade commander Sword Chi spirit. It immediately gave up on Chumu and slashed out a sword Chi, wanting to kill Bawang. Begging for praise, begging for praise, begging for praise. Chapter 10:28. The purple and red lightning and fire sword Chi were mighty and ferocious, destroying everything in its path. Bawang's face paled, and he quickly changed directions to avoid the lightning and fire sword Chi. Chumu brandished both swords, merging his immortal sword intent with the divine desolate sword essence. His top high god realm wind and lightning laws were integrated into one of his swords, swift as the wind and violent as lightning. The defensive sword techniques sword light contained the metal law, spinning and slashing. In the blink of an eye, Chumu restrained the commander-level sword Chi spirit, buying Bawang an opportunity. The whip sword lashed out, shwa 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 sounds pierced through the air, turning into countless afterimages, slicing through the true essence fruits on the true essence trees. With another suction force, all the true essence fruits were sucked into his spatial ring. Chumu had given him a high-grade spatial ring. In the blink of an eye, more than 300 low-grade true essence fruits were all harvested by Bawang. The commander-level sword Chi spirit was thoroughly enraged. The purple and red lines on its body glowed brightly, exuding an even more terrifying aura. Its body also expanded by one size, looking taller and stronger. The purple and red lights twined around the sword Chi, intertwining like two dragons dancing in the air. Every sword strike was powerful to the extreme, terrifying beyond compare. More importantly, this commander-level sword Chi spirit's sword technique was extremely exquisite, forcing Chumu to focus all his attention on dealing with it. Every sword strike was like a thunderbolt tearing through the air, like an explosion of flames. Mixed together, the power was even more terrifying. Lightning and fire came from the same source. Lightning increased the power of fire, and fire increased the power of lightning, increasing the power of each other. Not only that, but it also amplified the power of lightning and fire laws to the extreme, displaying 100% of their power. The commander-level sword Chi spirit's sword Chi seemed to have disappeared, turning into a purple lightning dragon and a red fire phoenix. The dragon's sword and the phoenix danced, the dragon descended and the phoenix descended, the dragon and the phoenix appeared at the same time. A thought flashed through Chumu's mind, as if he had grasped something. With both swords in his hands, the defensive sword technique's sword light circled around him, turning into a defensive stance. His eyes stared unblinkingly at the commander-level sword Chi spirit's sword technique, his divine sense covering every move, not missing any detail. The lightning dragon and fire phoenix roared, the phoenix's cries pierced through metal and cracked stone, incessant. Just the momentum alone was enough to shock anyone who looked at it. The great conqueror's face was solemn. His eyes flashed with a crazy fighting spirit. He clenched his fists tightly as a powerful force surged in his body. Traces of aura spread out, causing numerous cyclones to appear around his body, whistling and dispersing. The conqueror wanted to give his all to fight against such a powerful spirit of sword aura. However, he knew that he was no match for the spirit of sword aura. He would have to become a second-level beast king to be able to fight against the spirit of sword aura. Fight, fight, fight. The lightning dragon and fire phoenix danced in the air, attacking Chumu from all angles and bringing him immense pressure. Chumu was completely unaffected by the lightning dragon and fire phoenix. Zhang Xian's mind spun swiftly, and his soul energy continued to be depleted. His comprehension of swordsmanship continued to deepen, and he had already reached a critical point. The thunder dragon and fire phoenix attacked. Chumu did not dodge. Instead, he crossed his swords in front of him and assumed a defensive posture. The power in his muscles condensed and burst out in an instant, forcibly withstanding the bombardment of the Thunder Dragon and Fire Phoenix. In an instant, an indescribably powerful force erupted, charging over like an avalanche. More than half of it was offset by Chu Mu's eruption of earthquake energy, but the remaining half was still incomparably powerful, causing Chu Mu's two swords to tremble and almost fly out of his hands. The bones in his arms were almost broken, and his body seemed to have been directly rammed by an ancient mammoth, flying backwards. His chest felt stuffy, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. With a boom, his body heavily smashed into a huge rock hundreds of meters away, and his whole body was directly embedded in the huge rock. "Master!" Bawang was shocked and quickly rushed over. The commander-level sword Chi spirit did not hold back. It raised its Chi sword, and the thunder and fire precepts burst forth. It slashed down like it was splitting a mountain. The huge thunder and fire sword Chi plowed through the hard ground, leaving a deep trench. It slashed towards the huge rock, wanting to split it in half. In the blink of an eye, the boulder trembled as a terrifying energy erupted from within. Amidst the rumbling sounds, a long roar shook the heavens and earth. The boulder exploded into pieces, but it didn't explode. It was as if an invisible hand had gathered the pieces and smashed them forward with great force, smashing them one by one towards the lightning and fire sword Chi. Under the attack of the thunder fire sword Chi, the gravel was directly shattered. A figure followed behind the huge rock, and two incomparably bright sword light intertwined in an instant, as if turning into a green wind dragon and a purple thunder dragon. They roared and collided head-on with the thunder fire sword Chi, causing the thunder fire sword Chi to shatter like glass. The remaining power did not dissipate. The green wind dragon and the purple thunder dragon lined the sky mightily, rushing towards the commander-level sword Chi spirit, which was slashed out by Chu Mu's two swords. Swordsmanship was divided into horizontal and vertical. Horizontal was the domain of swordsmanship, from the 1st level to the 10th level, and vertical was the 3 realms of body, form, and spirit. Only by cultivating to the 10th level of swordsmanship horizontally, and to the divine realm vertically, could one be considered a true Deshang swordsman. In the past, Chu Mu's swordsmanship was horizontal. It was only when he cultivated to the peak of the 10th level that he realized the vertical aspect of swordsmanship. After that, he had been working hard to improve his swordsmanship. He had been stuck at the half-step to the divine realm for quite a long time. This time, after entering the real essence secret realm, he did not know how many sword Chi spirits he had killed and how many swordsmanship he had seen. He had constantly accumulated and improved, and had reached a critical point. Now, in the battle with the commander-level sword Chi spirit, the commander-level sword Chi spirit's swordsmanship was exquisite and unparalleled. Facing the blow of the commander-level sword Chi spirit head-on, and feeling its power and mystery, Chu Mu finally broke through the critical point, broke through the half-step to the divine realm, and truly stepped into the divine realm of swordsmanship. Even though it was only the beginning, Chu Mu's swordsmanship attainments had risen to a whole new level. Suddenly enlightened, all sorts of questions he had in the past were resolved, and all sorts of comprehensions and mysteries regarding swordsmanship surged forth. It turned out that swords could be used this way, it turned out that swordsmanship could be used this way, it turned out that the power of swordsmanship could reach such a powerful level, it turned out countless original understandings, gathered and condensed into a powerful sword, shattering the powerful sword Chi of thunder and fire. The remaining power did not dissipate as it charged towards the commander-level sword Chi spirit. Divine realm. It made Chu Mu's swordsmanship even more flexible, breaking through some kind of shackle, breaking through some kind of limit. All the moves were at his fingertips, like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky, like an antelope's antlers, without any moves, without any style, without any trace. At the same time that his swordsmanship broke through to the divine realm, his mastery of the various power of laws had also risen to a new level. The sword light was retracted, and the sword controlling technique was terminated. With 2 swords in hand, the gold and water laws condensed on the sacred sword in his left hand, while the wind and thunder laws condensed on the violent thunder sacred sword in his right hand. The divine wilderness sword essence, inextinguishable sword intent, 2 powers of laws. Such power was not inferior to the power of the commander-level sword chi spirit's swordsmanship, and even surpassed it. The situation was immediately reversed. Chu Mu's sword constantly struck the commander-level sword chi spirit's body, shattering it into pieces. Countless yuan chi dissipated, and although it quickly recovered, it still couldn't keep up with the speed of dissipation. On the other hand, Chu Mu, due to the breakthrough in his swordsmanship, had all kinds of enlightenment gushing out. He was in a state of excitement, and each strike was stronger than the last. Sharp, flexible, fast, violent, the laws of metal, the laws of water, the laws of wind, and the laws of lightning, Chu Mu became stronger the more he fought, and was in the stage of accumulating strength. On the other hand, the commander-level sword chi spirit became weaker as it fought. Its body was constantly damaged by the sword, and it began to fade as its strength decreased. Master's strength has become stronger. Bawang was dumbfounded. He secretly gritted his teeth and made up his mind to desperately increase his strength, so that he could keep up with his master's footsteps. The current Chu Mu seemed to be on steroids. It was a completely different scene from before when he was suppressed by the commander-level sword chi spirit. It made Bawang feel like he was dreaming. The 2 swords danced wildly, and the sword shadows condensed into a sphere, enveloping the commander-level sword chi spirit. The sword light continued to strike, and the speed of the sword continued to increase, reaching an indescribable level. Even ghosts and gods would be horrified. Suddenly, Chu Mu, who was feeling incomparably carefree, felt his sword slash through empty air. His entire being was separated from the incomparably carefree and excited feeling, and he was disappointed and frustrated. Under his sword, the commander-rank sword aura spirit had already disappeared without a trace. The ground was full of countless sword marks, crisscrossing and densely packed, like ravines, causing the ground to be fragmented. What a pity! Chu Mu couldn't help but sigh. If the commander-level sword chi spirit had held on for a while longer, perhaps his swordsmanship would have improved by a small level, from the early stage of the God Realm to the middle stage of the God Realm. Wasn't he too greedy? The trace of regret disappeared. Chu Mu also knew that being able to break through to the God Realm in swordsmanship was already an extremely good harvest. There was no need to think too much about breaking through another small level. He would just cultivate slowly and he would eventually reach it. He stopped the divine wilderness sword art, stopped Deshang's burning blood transformation, and hurriedly swallowed elixirs to recover his blood essence. He took the 4 spatial rings of the Samsung sword of Gojoseon that had been cut into pieces, called Bawang, and quickly left. In his current state, he didn't have much strength left. As expected, not long after Chu Mu left, a group of sword of Gojoseon came here. Looking at the bare true yuan tree, then looking at the shattered corpses and the countless sword marks on the ground, and sensing the remnant aura fluctuations in the air, they knew that there had been an extremely intense battle here not long ago. There were casualties on both sides, and it was likely that the sword of Gojoseon had won in the end. The true yuan fruits on the true yuan tree should have been taken away by the victorious sword of Gojoseon. After carefully sensing the remnant aura fluctuations, the group of sword of Gojoseon chased after Chu Mu and Bawang. If Chu Mu saw this group of sword of Gojoseon, he would definitely be shocked. This was because this group of sword of Gojoseon was Yu Byakuya's group. They were also the disciples of Heartbreak House, one of the 5 major factions. Chapter 10:29. On the vast land 2 figures stood tall. A terrifying aura gushed out from one of the vigorous figures. He soared into the sky and circled in the air at an even faster speed. Then, he changed his direction and dived down like a meteorite. He punched out and heavily smashed the hard ground. With a bang, white ripples visible to the naked eye spread out in all directions from where the fist hit the ground. Layer after layer of ripples spread out endlessly. The ground shook, and in the midst of a violent sonic boom, the ground began to shatter with the fist as the center. It was as if the ice on the surface of a lake was jumping, and the ripples spread out in all directions. This punch alone caused the ground to collapse with a diameter of dozens of meters. One had to know that the ground in the true essence realm was very hard. "Master, my strength has increased by several times," Bawang said excitedly as he retracted his fist. Seeing the destruction caused by Bawang's punch, Chu Mu was also surprised. It was a very powerful punch. Even an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojoseon would not dare to take it. Previously, when Chu Mu was fighting with the level 3 commander sword Aura Spirit, Bawang took the opportunity to pluck those low-grade vital essence fruit. There were as many as 380 of them. 380 low-rank true yuan fruit. To be honest, it was impossible for Chu Mu's cultivation to break through to the third heavenly layer of creation. He had done his own calculations and estimated that he would need about 4,000 low-rank true yuan fruits to reach the peak of the second heavenly layer of creation and then break through to the third heavenly layer of creation. However, Bawang really needed to increase his strength. Therefore, Chu Mu distributed the vital essence fruits to him. After eating 200 vital essence fruits, Bawang's strength successfully broke through the bottleneck and became a level 2 beast king. His body was stronger, and his strength and speed had greatly increased. His attack power had also become more tyrannical. Bawang has become a level 2 beast king. His strength has increased greatly. If we work together, we can easily kill a level 3 commander spirit of the sword Aura. But a king-rank spirit of the sword Aura. Chu Mu's eyes sparkled. To be honest, he really wanted to see the glory of a king-rank spirit of the sword Aura. If it was possible, fighting with a spirit of the sword Qi at the king level would definitely be of great help to his combat experience and understanding of swordsmanship. However, the increase in the level of the spirit of sword Aura was not only an increase in strength, but also in the attainment of swordsmanship. Chu Mu's breakthrough in swordsmanship allowed him to defeat a level 3 commander-grade spirit of sword Aura, but he had no confidence in fighting against a king-grade spirit of sword Aura. However, that was a matter for the future. At the very least, he hadn't had the chance to encounter it yet. Even before the true essence mystic realm closed, whether or not he would encounter it was still unknown. At this moment, 7 figures shot out from the sky at an extremely fast speed. Among the 7 people, one of them, the sword of Gojoseon, who was very sensitive to auras, said with certainty, "The remaining aura fluctuations should be left behind by the 2 people in front of us." In other words, those vital essence fruits were plucked by them. One of those 2 people looks familiar. I think he's the one I saw in the ancient palace. Chu Mu, so it's you. Even the heavens have destined you to die under my sword. Byakuya grinned when he saw Chu Mu's face. He didn't bother to hide his voice at all. It penetrated the air and went straight into Chu Mu's ears. Byakuya. Chu Mu frowned slightly. If it was just Byakuya alone, he wouldn't be afraid. The problem was that there were 6 other sword of Gojoseon with Byakuya. Chu Mu could tell that 4 of them were Samsung sword of Gojoseon, while the other 2 had strong auras. They should be intermediate sword of Gojoseon. Chu Mu didn't have the confidence to fight against such a lineup. After all, the other party wasn't an ordinary sword of Gojoseon, but a disciple of Broken Heart House. They were extremely talented and powerful. Byakuya's speed suddenly increased as he rushed towards Chu Mu. At the same time, he said, "Fellow brothers, Chu Mu's life will be taken by me." Hearing Byakuya's words, the other 6 sword of Gojoseon didn't object. They also sped up and spread out. Especially the two intermediate sword of Gojoseon, their speed suddenly increased by several times. They directly flew above Chu-Mu and formed an encirclement to prevent Chu-Mu from escaping. Seeing this situation, Chu-Mu knew that it wouldn't be easy to escape today. He also understood that if he wanted to leave, he could definitely break out of the encirclement. However, the problem was Byakuya. Chu-Mu also wanted to kill him. Now, the other 6 sword of Gojoseon didn't make a move. Instead, they formed an encirclement to prevent him from escaping. The one who made a move was Byakuya. This was an opportunity to kill Byakuya. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to kill Byakuya in the future. With a cold glint in his eyes, Chu-Mu directly transmitted his voice to Bawang, telling him what to do later. Bawang nodded inwardly. He stood motionless on the spot. His fierce eyes were locked onto Byakuya, ready to attack at any time. Chu-Mu, die! With a roar, Byakuya unsheathed his sword. The rules of gold and the rules of wind burst out and merged into his body. He performed a sword technique that cut through the void at an even faster speed towards Chu-Mu. The incomparably terrifying aura was astonishingly sharp. Before the sword arrived, Chu-Mu could already feel the sharpness piercing through the void and stabbing into his body, causing his protective sword aura to almost shatter. His entire body was locked down and oppressed, unable to dodge. This was an extremely powerful sword technique. Junior brother Lu directly performed his proud sword technique. It seems like he intends to end his opponent in one strike. He's just a 2-star sword of Gojoseon. If there weren't the restrictions of the true energy secret realm, senior brother Lu would have broken through to become a 4-star sword of Gojoseon. His sword technique is so powerful that his opponent can't withstand it at all. Even if he's lucky enough to withstand the first strike, he won't be able to withstand the second strike. The other sword of Gojoseon of Broken Heart Pavilion said one after another. The two intermediate sword of Gojoseon smiled. In their opinion, with Byakuya's strength, killing a 2-star sword of Gojoseon, even if the latter had extraordinary talent, would be impossible for him to survive. They had never seen the battle between Chu-Mu and the commander-level spirit of Sword Chi. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought so. Byakuya wanted to kill Chu-Mu with a tyrannical stance. Chu-Mu also had the same idea. Byakuya launched a powerful sword technique. Chu-Mu was waiting for the best opportunity, and so was Bawang. Chu-Mu, you're the #1 Fortune Gate disciple, but today, you'll die under my sword. A ferocious voice filled with killing intent seemed to ring in his ears. Byakuya's second-grade earth-piercing sword technique had the characteristic of locking on to the target, making it impossible to dodge. If he couldn't dodge, then he wouldn't dodge. Chu-Mu also didn't plan to dodge. His eyes narrowed and his pupils contracted. A cold light burst out from his eyes. Byakuya's sword was right in front of him, piercing towards his heart. It was incomparably sharp, as if it wanted to shatter his heart in one strike. In the blink of an eye, white lightning flashed from Chu-Mu's waist. The violent thunder holy sword turned into a streak of lightning as it flew out of its sheath. Chu-Mu's muscles bulged as he activated the earth-shaking energy, slashing towards Byakuya's sword. Byakuya was shocked to find that his sure-kill sword was actually hit by Chu-Mu's sword. Moreover, there was a terrifying shockwave that caused his sword to deviate uncontrollably. At the same time, Bawang's whip sword swung in a beautiful arc. The incomparably sharp sword tip pierced forward 3 times in an instant. Bawang's 3 consecutive strikes pierced towards Byakuya's head. Bawang's sudden attack was so fierce that it startled Byakuya. He quickly controlled his body to move to the side. At this time, a streak of green light appeared in front of Byakuya's eyes. It was like a gust of wind was blowing towards him. It was impossible to dodge, impossible to block. Byakuya only felt as if his neck was being stung. He felt a slight pain, and the world in his eyes seemed to be spinning. It was too fast. From the time Ubyakuya used his sword to get close to Chumu, to when Chumu knocked away Ubyakuya's sword, to when Bawang attacked and Chumu used his two swords to slash Ubyakuya's neck. All of this happened in just a breath's time. Without hesitation, he directly put Bawang into the beast's space and took off Ubyakuya's space ring. Chumu once again used Deshang's burning blood transformation and Deshang's imperial sword technique. With an explosive speed, he rushed towards the direction of a Samsung sword of Gojoseon. This was Chumu's plan from the beginning. He wanted to kill Ubyakuya with a thunderous speed and choose a direction to break through. The direction he chose must be the Samsung sword of Gojoseon, and not the two intermediate sword of Gojoseon. As soon as Ubyakuya was killed, the sixth sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart House reacted one after another. They were incomparably furious and did not hesitate to attack. 6 terrifying sword skills pierced through the air, causing the world to shake. Chumu rushed towards one of the sword skills and dodged in an instant. He quickly approached the Samsung sword of Gojoseon. With the cultivation of the second sky of Fate Realm, the speed of Deshang's imperial sword technique, Deshang's burning blood transformation, and the earthquake force had completely surpassed the full speed of an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojoseon. In an instant, Chumu flew past the Samsung sword of Gojoseon. At the same time, the sword in his left hand slashed out, breaking the opponent's protective sword aura and cutting off the opponent's neck. His head flew high into the air. Unfortunately, there was no time to take his spatial ring. Chumu. 2 Samsung sword of Gojoseon had died in a row, and one of them was his cousin. One of the 2 intermediate sword of Gojoseon roared angrily. His voice was filled with hatred, and even the surging river could not wash it away. An extremely terrifying aura was extremely violent, wreaking havoc around his body. He moved at full speed and chased after Chumu with the sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart House. Chumu must die. Chumu must die. This was the biggest thought in the hearts of the 5 sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart House. Their speed exploded, and they even used a secret technique to increase their speed. The 2 intermediate sword of Gojoseon immediately pulled away from the other 3 Samsung sword of Gojoseon and gradually closed in on Chumu. Suddenly, the sword of light that Chumu had transformed into trembled, and his speed doubled again. With an even faster speed, he slowly moved away from the 2 intermediate sword of Gojoseon until his back disappeared. Chapter 1030. The faint red sword light streaked across the sky like a stream of light, disappearing in an instant. In terms of speed, Chumu was still faster than the intermediate sword of Gojoseon after all. He successfully escaped from the pursuit of the 2 intermediate sword of Gojoseon. One could imagine how furious the 2 intermediate sword of Gojoseon and the other 3 Samsung sword of Gojoseon would be. Their hatred for Chumu could not be washed away by the torrential river. Chumu was also clear that if they met again, they would definitely attack him and kill him. Ubyakuya's death could be considered as settling a grudge, but it also provoked an even greater grudge. The world of swordsmen was like this. Revenge breeds revenge, and there was no time. Unless one became very powerful, so powerful that no one dared to provoke you, all grudges would naturally disappear. Chumu had been working hard to reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship, to become so powerful that no one could surpass him. However, the current him was still very, very far away. He stopped the burning blood transformation and the defensive sword technique. Then, he took out some medicinal pills and consumed them to recover. The blood yang pills that he had been consuming had not been replenished. The remaining medicinal pills could only support him to execute the great success burning blood transformation 4 or 5 more times. If he included the golden vein blood yang pills, he could execute it 2 more times. Landing on the ground, he took out Ubyakuya's spatial ring and checked it. as expected of the Samsung Sword of Gojoseon of the Broken Heart Pavilion. The collection in the spatial ring was very rich. There were more than 10 million upper-grade profound crystals. Adding the other pills, Chumu found more than 200 true yuan fruit. Adding the remaining 180, Chumu had more than 400 low-grade true yuan fruit. After recovering his strength, he walked on the ground of the true yuan secret realm. Whenever he encountered a sword chi spirit, he would draw his sword and fight. In the midst of life and death battles, he would constantly improve his swordsmanship. In the center of the Zhen Yuan realm, there was a huge palace that was nearly 1,000 meters tall. It stood on the ground as if it had existed since ancient times. In fact, this huge, ancient palace had already existed when the True Yuan realm first opened. This palace was called the True Essence Great Hall, and it was the center of the True Essence Mystic Realm. At this moment, the Zhen Yuan Great Hall stood tall on the ground. Lights of different colors enveloped the Zhen Yuan Great Hall. Those were seals, countless tyrannical seals that were almost impossible to break. Anyone who tried to enter the Zhen Yuan Great Hall would be blocked by the multicolored seals. If they tried to force their way in, they would be torn to pieces by the multicolored seals. In each of the 4 directions of the True Essence Hall, there was a 100-meter-tall palace. They were all simple and unadorned. However, in terms of scale, they could not compare to the True Essence Hall. The 4 small and unadorned palaces were not covered by seals. However, in the open space outside the palace doors, a large group of sword chi spirits gathered. These 4 small palaces only had one tightly shut door that could be opened. The other directions were all sealed, and they were extremely hard. Even an attack from a high-level sword of Gojoseon would not be able to break them, let alone a low-level sword of Gojoseon. At this moment, thousands of meters away from the 4 small palaces, many sword of Gojoseon had gathered. According to the statistics, there are a total of 3,000 sword chi spirits outside the East Palace. Wei Chang, the 7-star sword of Gojoseon, said in a low voice. His cultivation had been suppressed to the 3rd heaven of creation realm, but his strength was not something that a Samsung sword of Gojoseon could compare with. Even a real 4-star sword of Gojoseon was no match for him. Therefore, among the group of sword of Gojoseon outside the East Palace, he had the right to speak. In addition to Wei Chang, there were 2 7-star sword of Gojoseon in the East Palace. One was called Luo Hua, and the other was called Ji Shunning. 3,000 sword chi spirits, all of them at level 3. If my eyes are not mistaken, the sword chi spirit at the back should be the legendary king-level sword chi spirit. Luo Hua pointed his sword at the sword chi spirit 10,000 meters away, and said in a low voice, 1 level 3 monarch tier sword chi spirit, 12 level 3 commander tier sword chi spirits, 360 level 3 elite tier sword chi spirits, and the rest are all normal level 3 sword chi spirits. Ji Shunning frowned. The commander level sword chi spirits already have basic intelligence, but the king-level sword chi spirits are even more intelligent. They already know how to command lower-level sword chi spirits to fight. Not to mention the monarch rank spirit of sword chi, just those over 2,000 ordinary rank 3 spirit of sword chi were enough to make the 3 7-star sword kings worry. They were powerful, and were able to insta-kill any rank 3 spirit of sword chi. Even to the extent that with a single sword skill, killing a few or a dozen spirit of sword chi was nothing difficult. But the problem was that their cultivation was limited. They could not use powerful sword techniques, and it was difficult for them to withstand the attacks of the sword chi spirit. In order to open the Zhen Yuan Hall, we must first enter the 4 small halls in the east, west, south, and north halls and break the seal of the Zhen Yuan Hall. And in order to enter the 4 small halls, we must pass through the group of sword chi spirit. Only by killing the king-level sword chi spirits can we open the doors of the small halls and enter. Ji Shunning continued, her gaze sweeping across everyone's faces. In other words, no matter what, we must kill all of these sword chi spirit. I believe that the sword of Gojoseon outside the other 3 small halls also have the same idea. In fact, the high-tier sword of Gojoseon entered the Zhen Yuan secret realm with a purpose. Their purpose was to open the Zhen Yuan Hall. From now on, I don't care where you come from or what your status is. All of you must listen to our orders. Attack together, kill those sword chi spirits, and open the East Hall. Luo Hua waved his long sword with an awe-inspiring aura. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he swept his gaze across everyone. Why should we? One of the Samsung sword of Gojoseon suddenly sneered and retorted, Your purpose is to enter the Zhen Yuan Hall, but I have no such intention. Why should I listen to your orders? Very well, you have guts. Luo Hua stared coldly at the 3-star Sword King, while Wei Chang and Ji Shunning both had cold smiles on their faces. You only have 2 choices. The first is to obey our orders and commands. The second is to die by my sword. How dare you, I am. The Samsung sword of Gojoseon was shocked and angry. Just as he was about to announce his identity in an attempt to intimidate the other party, Luo Hua did not hesitate to slash out with his sword. In an instant, a ball of fiery red light bombarded out like a meteor. The air was scorched and the earth was dried up. The Samsung sword of Gojoseon was locked in place, and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly waved his sword to block, but he was hit head-on and instantly flew out. He spat out blood and his body was scorched black. He was almost killed. You dare to attack directly. On one hand he was shocked, on the other hand he was angry, and on the other hand he was injured. The Samsung sword of Gojoseon was trembling all over. I said, in here, no matter who you are, what your background is, unless you have the strength to compete with any one of the 3 of us, you have to listen to our orders. Luo Hua contemptuously glanced at the 3-star Sword King. His eyes swept across the crowd. Remember, in here, no status is of any use. If you die, you die. If you are dissatisfied with me, then live on. After leaving the Zhen Yuan mystic realm, you can use the power behind you to retaliate against me. But now, if you don't listen to my command, then there will be another soul under my sword. Such a threat, of course, no one dared to say anything. Of course, some people did not care. In this world, the strong were respected, and the weak had no right to speak. Not to mention, they also wanted to enter the Zhen Yuan Palace. Maybe there would be some gains. There were nearly 1,000 sword of Gojoseon gathered in the East Palace, including Chu Mu and Boang. Luo Hua and the other two's overbearingness, and everyone's reaction, Chu Mu did not intend to refute. He also did not have the strength to refute. Although he did not like Luo Hua's overbearingness, Chu Mu also knew that what Luo Hua said was very reasonable. Then, he had to work hard to improve his strength. Personal strength was the most important thing. The other families and sects were just external forces. At the critical moment, they could not be used. As the center of the True Origin secret realm, the True Origin Palace was of the utmost importance. Since he had come, Chu Mu naturally wanted to enter. Since he wanted to enter with his own strength, he simply couldn't do it. Thus, he could only join hands with the other Sword Kings. Only by breaking through the 4 small palaces could he open the True Origin Palace. What was in the Zhen Yuan Palace? Chu Mu did not know. Only when he entered the Zhen Yuan secret realm would he know. Nearly 1,000 sword of Gojoseon against 3,000 sword chi spirit. Who would win and who would lose would depend on how the battle went. In fact, Luo Hua and the other 2 advanced sword of Gojoseon did not have any talent or experience in military formations. Their so-called command was just to gather the sword of Gojoseon together. When the battle started, they would release a powerful sword skill together and kill the sword chi spirits first. The more sword chi spirits died, the greater their advantage would be. Outside the other 3 small palaces, the sword of Gojoseon also gathered. The number of sword of Gojoseon outside the 4 small palaces was close to 1,000. Their opponents were the same. 1 level 3 monarch level sword chi spirit, 12 level 3 commander level sword chi spirits, 360 level 3 elite level sword chi spirits, and more than 2,000 level 3 normal level sword chi spirit. Such a powerful lineup was not to be underestimated. Now, everyone, adjust your breathing. Let your strength reach its peak and prepare for battle. Luohua ordered. The Sword Kings didn't refute, nor did they intend to do the right thing. Since they were going to fight, then they should fight in their peak state and bring out their strongest strength. Otherwise, if they were to die under the Sword Chi Spirit's Chi Sword because of their own negligence and inadequacy, that would be tragic. As Chu-Mu adjusted his breathing, he began to think. Fighting was a must. How to survive in a fight was the most important. Facing 3,000 sword aura spirits, he didn't think that every Sword King would be able to survive. As for who would survive and who would die in the fight, it would all depend on themselves. Chapter 1031. Sword Chi Storm. Nearly 1,000 Sword of Gojoseon, led by the 3 7-star Sword of Gojoseon, Wei Chang, Luo Hua, and Ji Shunning, all unleashed their powerful auras. The Sword of Gojoseon was unsheathed, and the power of sword intent and sword origin rules of order gathered on the sacred swords. Following Luo Hua's order, the Sword of Gojoseon all shot towards the group of sword chi spirits. The distance was too far, so they couldn't use their sword skills. Otherwise, their sword skills would be depleted before they could even hit the sword chi spirit. The sword chi spirit's sword chi were very powerful, but they couldn't cover a distance of nearly 10,000 meters. That way, their power would be depleted. The moment the Sword of Gojoseon appeared, the sword chi spirits sensed them. The king-level sword chi spirits at the back waved the sword chi in their hands and mobilized their troop. The sword chi spirits immediately moved and formed a crescent moon formation. The sword chi condensed. Under the command of the king-level sword chi spirits, the sword chi spirits raised their sword chi and slashed out. A terrifying sonic boom was heard. Streaks of powerful sword chi streaked across the sky, densely packed like a sword chi storm, covering a part of the sky. The earth-shattering roar was heard, causing the Sword of Gojoseon's faces to change and their scalps to tingle. "Scatter!" Luo Hua shouted. His voice was like a bell, covering the sonic boom of the sword chi as it traveled into the ears of every Sword of Gojoseon. Immediately, half of the Sword of Gojoseon moved to the left, while the other half moved to the right, avoiding the sword chi from the Sword of Gojoseon. They raised their swords and slashed forward. In an instant, a green-red storm swept out. It was an Earth-tier sword skill of Wind Rule and Fire Rule. Wei Chang and Ji Shunning also attacked at the same time. Torrential waves roared endlessly as golden light filled the sky. Countless golden sword rays were densely packed like locusts. Slash, slash, slash. Every Sword of Gojoseon had finished accumulating power. They attacked with their swords, and one sword skill after another was unleashed. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, ice, thunder, cloud, and other types of rule force sword skills were available. They were colorful and dazzling. Attacks from both sides slashed at the sword chi spirit. The speed of the sword technique was extremely fast. Even though the spirit of the monarch-grade sword chi possessed extraordinary intelligence, it was still unable to react in time. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, over 1,000 sword techniques bombarded the sword chi spirit. The sword chi spirits did not just sit there and wait for their death. They raised their chi swords to defend themselves. An earth-shattering explosion occurred. Flames invaded the area. Colorful lights flashed in all directions. The shockwave from the explosion of the sword chi formed a turbulent flow that spread out in all directions. The ground was shattered, scorched, and countless cracks appeared. In just one exchange, more than 400 sword chi spirits were killed. More than 200 sword chi spirits were left with broken bodies. They were constantly absorbing the surrounding yuan qi to replenish themselves. The ones that were killed were only ordinary level 3 sword qi spirit. The elite grade level 3 sword qi spirit and commander grade sword qi spirit were unharmed, let alone the monarch grade sword qi spirit. Once the first wave succeeded, the second wave of sword qi was unleashed once again, bombarding the sword qi spirit. The monarch grade sword qi spirit seemed to be enraged. It exuded a strong aura and slashed its qi swords. A terrifying three-colored sword qi cut across the sky. It was hundreds of meters long and came crashing down. It destroyed a portion of the sword qi spirit, but there was still some energy left. It swept past a few sword of Gojosian that could not dodge in time. The fact was that the monarch grade sword qi spirit was strong. Under this three-colored sword qi, a few sword of Gojosian could not resist at all. They were cut in half at the waist. They struggled and wailed as they fell to the ground and died. The other sword qi spirits, under the command of the monarch grade sword qi spirit and the leadership of the 12 commander grade sword qi spirits, got into formation in an orderly manner. They attacked with their swords. The terrifying sword qi broke through the air and attacked from both sides. Immediately after, the 6 commander grade sword qi spirits led 180 elite grade sword qi spirits and close to 1,000 normal grade 3 sword qi spirits to attack from both sides. They attacked the sword of Gojosian from both sides. What the sword qi spirits were best at was actually sword fighting. The power of their sword techniques was as terrifying as a sword skill. Once they got close to them, most of the sword of Gojosian would be in a precarious situation. The sword qi spirits were very fast. Their bodies seemed to be weightless. They changed directions in the air and were very agile. The situation after that became a close combat situation. Luo Hua and the other two could not command them anymore. This was because they had to hold back the monarch grade sword qi spirit. Otherwise, the situation would not be good. The monarch grade sword qi spirit was indeed terrifying. It raised its sword qi and instantly appeared in front of a Samsung sword of Gojosian. With a slash, the Samsung sword of Gojosian did not even have time to react before its head was cut off. The head that flew high up in the air had a dazed look in its eyes. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian was not a match for the monarch grade sword qi spirit at all. This was because every time the monarch grade sword qi spirit attacked, the power of its sword was equivalent to an earth grade 3 earthbreaker sword skill. Once the sword qi spirit's power was depleted, it would immediately recover. Swordsmen could not do this at all. In just a short span of 3 breaths, more than a dozen Samsung sword of Gojosian were buried under the monarch grade sword qi spirit's sword qi. If they did not stop it, these sword of Gojosian would be killed. This was because the sword qi spirit did not have the so-called energy consumption. As long as it was not defeated, it could fight without limit. The monarch grade sword qi spirit was really too fierce. The 3 of them did not have the confidence to fight it alone. They had to work together. When the 3 7-star sword of Gojosian worked together, they directly blocked the monarch grade sword qi spirit and fought fiercely. The 12 commander level sword qi spirits were also very tyrannical and were not to be underestimated. Chumu blocked a commander level sword qi spirit. Originally, he planned to hide his strength, but the commander level sword qi spirit was very tyrannical. An ordinary sword of Gojosian could not compete with it at all. An ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian would be killed in a single exchange. Although there were some intermediate sword of Gojosian whose cultivation had been suppressed, they were also held back by the elite-level sword qi spirit. A commander-level sword qi spirit was unstoppable. Chumu had no choice but to attack. He exploded with a portion of his strength to hold back this commander-level sword qi spirit. Based on the current situation, it was not a good thing to have too many sword of Gojosian die. Chumu had also only exploded with a portion of his strength. He was only holding back the commander-level sword qi spirit. Moreover, He looked like he was barely holding back. Even so, the sword of Gojosian beside him were very shocked. A mere 2-star sword of Gojosian was actually much stronger than the Samsung sword of Gojosian. Looking at the many Samsung sword of Gojosian, they were at a disadvantage, or even killed after exchanging a few blows with the commander-level sword Chi Spirit. However, Chu Mu was able to hold back a level 3 commander-level sword Chi Spirit, although it looked like he was barely holding back. Luo Hua and the other two who were holding back the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit also caught a glimpse of Chu Mu holding back the commander-level sword Chi Spirit from the corner of their eyes. They were very surprised. They immediately paid attention to Chu Mu, this 2-star sword of Gojosian. Holding back the commander-level sword Chi Spirit and dodging it time and time again, he once again experienced the commander-level sword Chi Spirit's sword skills. Every commander-level sword Chi Spirit's sword skills were about the same, but their styles were different. They had their own merit. Moreover, their mastery of the power of the rules was very profound. It was also something worth learning. Even if the three of them worked together, it would be very difficult to kill a level 3 monarch-level sword Chi Spirit. This was because once a monarch-level sword Chi Spirit was injured, it would recover immediately. However, once a swordsman was injured, it would be very difficult for him to recover. It was impossible to kill this monarch-level sword Chi Spirit with just the three of them in a short period of time. The only thing they could do was to hold it back and let the other sword of Gojosian unleash their full strength to kill these sword Chi Spirit. Although the sword Chi Spirits had the upper hand in terms of numbers, they were much weaker in terms of intelligence. Without the command of the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit, the normal level 3 sword Chi Spirits could only rely on their instincts to fight. The sword of Gojosian teamed up in 2s and 3s to form a sword formation to fight against the sword Chi Spirits. Their lethality increased greatly. In addition, the stronger sword Chi Spirits were held back by the experts. Under this situation, the sword Chi Spirits kept dying, turning into energy and dissipating into the air. No one noticed that the dissipating energy seemed to be inexplicably attracted and floated towards the direction of the Palace of True Essence. The normal level 3 sword Chi Spirits kept decreasing, while the sword of Gojosian also suffered casualties, but it was not that obvious. Suddenly, the monarch-level sword of Gojosian slashed out 3 times in an instant, breaking through the encirclement of 3 7-star sword of Gojosian. Its body seemed to have been flattened into a sheet of paper as it rushed out from the gap. As it raised its sword, a huge sword chi broke through the air and slashed out. At the same time, like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, it rushed towards the group of Samsung sword of Gojosian who had formed a sword formation. With one charge, more than 10 Samsung sword of Gojosian and a 4-star sword of Gojosian, whose cultivation was suppressed, died under the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit's sword Chi without any resistance. It was unbelievably brutal. Luo Hua and the other two were shocked and angry. The monarch-level sword Chi Spirit had actually forced them to retreat and escaped from the encirclement of the three of them. It even killed more than 10 sword of Gojosian. This was simply a slap to their faces. Secret technique. Luo Hua's angry voice was like a cold wind blowing through the gaps. He immediately used his secret technique, regardless of the side effect. Wei Chong and Ji Shunning were also very angry. They also used their secret techniques. With a rumbling sound, their strength increased by more than a fold. With a flash of their bodies, they once again formed an encirclement, surrounding the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit. Under the use of their secret techniques, the power of their swords increased greatly, their speed increased, and the encirclement became even tighter, eliminating any possibility of the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit escaping. Chu Mu held back the commander-level sword Chi Spirit while observing the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit's swordsmanship. Just now, the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit suddenly rushed out of the encirclement of the 3 sword of Gojosian and instantly killed more than 10 Samsung sword of Gojosian and a 4-star sword of Gojosian. This made Chu Mu very shocked. That strength was really tyrannical and unparalleled. The monarch-level sword Chi Spirit's swordsmanship was more than twice as exquisite as the commander-level sword Chi Spirit's swordsmanship. Chu Mu couldn't wait to use his full strength to kill the commander-level sword Chi Spirit in front of him as soon as possible, and then fight with the monarch-level sword Chi Spirit. However, his rationality told him that he couldn't do that. Outside the other 3 small halls, the battle was equally intense. The monarch-level sword Chi Spirit was being fought by the 7-star sword of Gojoseon, who had their cultivation suppressed. Chapter 1032. I'm here to help you. A voice came from afar, and from the corner of his eyes, a figure flashed. Sword light pierced through the air, piercing towards the commander-level spirit of sword Chi. It was an intermediate sword of Gojoseon whose cultivation had been suppressed. He had already gotten rid of a commander-level spirit of sword Chi and hurried over to help Chu Mu. Exhaling, Chu Mu looked relieved. With someone to share his burden, he felt much more relaxed. He could pay more attention to the battle between the monarch-level spirit of sword Chi and the 3 advanced sword of Gojoseon. How should I address you? The intermediate sword of Gojoseon asked Chu Mu as he attacked with his sword. He saw that Chu Mu was only at the 2nd heavenly layer of destiny, but his battle prowess was so strong that he was definitely on the same level as a peerless genius. He wanted to befriend him. Chu Mu. While dealing with the commander-level spirit of sword Chi, Chu Mu had to watch the battle between the monarch-level spirit of sword Chi, and was still paying attention to his surroundings. A hint of surprise flashed in the eyes of the intermediate sword of Gojoseon. I heard that the number 1 fortune disciple is called Chu Mu. Could it be you? If there is no one else, it should be me. Chu Mu's eyes were still glancing at the monarch-level spirit of sword Chi as he replied unhurriedly. Hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. Brother Chu is only a 2-star sword of Gojoseon, but you can fight a level 3 commander spirit of sword Chi without being at a disadvantage. No wonder you are the number 1 fortune disciple. The intermediate sword of Gojoseon avoided the attack of the commander-level spirit of sword Chi and replied to Chu Mu. He then immediately said, Brother Chu, let us use our full strength and kill this spirit of sword Chi in the shortest time possible. What do you think? All right. Chu Mu nodded his head and pretended to explode. His aura swept forth and the speed of his sword attacks slightly increased. His strength was also slightly more tyrannical. His strength had increased by about 30%. In the eyes of a middle-stage sword king, this was very normal. He also exploded out with power, and his sword's attack power became even more tyrannical. The 2 of them cooperated quite well, blocking, dodging, and counterattacking. Sword after sword struck the commander-grade sword Chi Spirit's body until it finally shattered. This time, Chu Mu noticed that after the sword Chi Spirit was defeated, the origin Chi quickly flowed in one direction. It was the direction of the True Essence Hall. However, Chu Mu didn't think too much about it because the battle was still going on. Following the death of the commander-grade sword of Gojoseon, more and more powerful sword of Gojoseon were freed up to assist the other sword of Gojoseon in killing their opponents. The number of sword of Gojoseon's spirit of sword of Gojoseon dwindled. In the end, only a monarch-grade sword of Gojoseon was left. It was still engaged in a fierce battle with 3 high-grade sword of Gojoseon. Looking at the situation, it seemed that it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. Chu Mu couldn't help but sigh again. A monarch-grade sword of Gojoseon was indeed extremely tyrannical. Seeing that the other sword of Gojoseon had killed their opponents, and only the 3 most powerful sword of Gojoseon were still unable to take down this monarch-grade sword of Gojoseon, Luo Hua and the other 2 couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Chu Mu, on the other hand, wasn't anxious at all. He couldn't wait for the battle to continue, so that he could observe and comprehend more, until he couldn't comprehend anymore. Facing 3 high-grade sword of Gojosian whose cultivation was suppressed and who had used a secret technique, the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian displayed astonishing tenacity. It fought to the death without retreating, and was not afraid of death. The urgency to enter the true essence hall made Luo Hua and the other 2 a little impatient. Listen, we'll retreat together later. All of you attack together and use your most powerful sword skills to kill this sword of Gojosian. Wei Chong gritted his teeth and said. Although he felt very embarrassed, he also knew that if they continued to fight based on the current situation, even if they had the upper hand, they would still have to fight fiercely for a period of time. Maybe a quarter of an hour, maybe an hour, before they could defeat this monarch-grade sword of Gojosian. When Luo Hua and Ji Shunning heard this, they didn't have the slightest intention of objecting. When the surrounding sword of Gojosian heard this, they hurriedly gathered their strength, and a tyrannical power condensed on their sharp swords. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, Luo Hua, Wei Chong and Ji Shunning suddenly burst forth, and slashed out with their extremely tyrannical swords. It was a close combat sword skill, and the 3 sword skills directly hit the body of the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian, causing the sword of Gojosian to tremble all over, its energy dissipated, and its body instantly stiffened because of the powerful force. Using this opportunity, the 3 of them burst forth with their fastest speed and retreated. The sword of Gojosian all attacked with their swords, and colorful sword skills of different shapes and colors, from all directions, blasted towards the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian, and directly drowned the sword of Gojosian. So many sword skills, and all of them were extremely powerful, at least at the level of Earth Tier 2nd rank Earth-breaking sword skills. Chu Mu imagined that no matter how powerful the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian was, it wouldn't be able to withstand it. As expected, when the aftershock of the sword skills dissipated, the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian had already disappeared without a trace, and the ground where the sword of Gojosian was at was in ruins, full of potholes and countless cracks like a ruin. Almost 1,000 sword of Gojosian, and after the battle with the sword of Gojosian, there were only about 600 left, and it could be considered a heavy loss. However, the 600 sword of Gojosian all unleashed their powerful sword skills, bombarding the body of the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian. The power was truly terrifying beyond compare. Once the monarch-grade sword of Gojosian died, the layer of seal on the door of the East Palace suddenly faded, and then disappeared. "Everyone, let's recover first," Luo Hua said, and took out some elixirs and threw them into his mouth. In this battle, not only did more than 300 sword of Gojosian die, the surviving sword of Gojosian's strength had also been greatly depleted, and urgently needed to recover. Not long after, the sword of Gojosian's strength had completely recovered, and they all stood up, and walked towards the door of the East Palace, and rushed through the door in a single file. The East Palace was empty, and there was only a colorful ball floating in midair, emitting waves of sealing power. That's one of the sealing sources of the True Vitality Hall. Only by breaking it can we open the True Vitality Hall. Luo Hua pointed at the colorful ball and said. There was no danger in breaking the sealing source, and every sword of Gojosian attacked. Waves of attacks bombarded the sealing source, causing the sealing source to tremble. The sealing source was extremely sturdy, and no matter how the sword of Gojosian attacked, it did not look like it was broken, and everyone had to increase the power of their attacks. 600 sword of Gojosian attacked continuously for half an hour, and then there was a cracking sound, and a crack appeared on the sealing source. Seeing that there was hope, everyone was overjoyed and continued to attack. With every attack, the crack on the sealing source seemed to expand. After a dozen breaths, the entire sealing source shattered, and the East Palace trembled, as if something had happened. Let's go to the True Vitality Hall, Luo Hua said, and rushed out of the East Palace, and rushed towards the True Vitality Hall. At the same time, the sealing sources of the 3 smaller halls in the East, West, and North Palace were also broken. When everyone rushed out of the East Palace, they saw that outside the 1,000-meter-tall True Vitality Hall, the colorful seals were fluctuating, like the surface of a lake being blown by the wind, and ripples spread out. Then, countless seals began to fade, and many Sword of Gojosian gathered outside the True Vitality Hall. Their eyes were burning, and they stared at the closed door of the True Vitality Hall, waiting for the seals to disappear. Every breath felt like a day, and the speed at which the seals were disappearing made everyone anxious. A quarter of an hour felt like a few years. Just as the many Sword of Gojosian were about to go crazy, the seals finally disappeared. Without saying a word, more than a dozen high-grade Sword of Gojosian shot out without hesitation, and in an instant, they broke through the heavy door of the True Vitality Hall and rushed inside. How could the other Sword of Gojosian be willing to fall behind? One by one, they burst out with their fastest speed, and like a meteor shower, they shot towards the True Vitality Hall's door. Chu-Mu was also in the crowd, and Bawang followed closely behind Chu-Mu, rushing towards the True Vitality Hall's door. As soon as they passed through the door, Chu-Mu's body trembled, and it was hard to describe the feeling in that instant. Just like Chu-Mu, the other Sword of Gojosian also trembled, and they couldn't help but let out a sound of pleasure. What dense and pure Yuan Qi! A Sword of Gojosian couldn't help but exclaim. This is the first time I've experienced the densest and purest Yuan Qi of Gojosian. It's almost liquefied. Another Sword of Gojosian exclaimed. This place was very spacious, and should be the front hall of the True Vitality Hall. Apart from the walls, there was nothing else. But there were countless white ribbons floating in the air, and although they couldn't be touched, they could still feel the shockingly pure energy contained within. The Sword of Gojosian were all very familiar with this energy, because they came into contact with it every day or even all the time. It was just that it wasn't as dense as this. Yuan Qi, the density and purity of the Yuan Qi of Gojosian were both incomparably shocking. The Sword of Gojosian was right. The Yuan Qi here was indeed so dense and pure that it was almost liquefied. What was liquefied? It could only be extracted from supreme-grade origin crystals. 10,000 supreme-grade origin crystals could only extract 1 kilogram of liquefied Yuan Qi. Looking at the liquefied Yuan Qi floating in the front hall, which covered an area of tens of thousands of meters and was hundreds of meters high, how many kilograms would it be if it was liquefied? 10,000 kilograms? 100,000 kilograms? Or more? It was unimaginable. I'm going to cultivate here. A Sword of Gojosian seemed to be so excited that he forgot that in the True Vitality realm, his cultivation could not exceed the third heavenly layer of creation realm. He sat down cross-legged, operated his cultivation method, and began to cultivate. The liquefied Yuan Qi was drawn into his body, and in less than 15 minutes, the Sword of Gojosian's face changed, revealing a pained expression. His body shook like a sieve, and he forcibly stopped cultivating. With a muffled groan, he spat out a mouthful of blood. It's too dense. My meridians can't bear it, and I almost exploded, the Sword of Gojosian said after wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His words made the others not know whether to laugh or cry, but also made their hearts tremble. A glint flashed in Chu-Mu's eyes because he thought of a very important problem. He couldn't wait to give it a try. If he succeeded, it meant that in the True Origin Palace, his sword energy would be inexhaustible. Chapter 1033. An endless stream of white gas floated in the front hall of the True Essence Hall. It filled the entire front hall that was tens of thousands of meters wide and hundreds of meters tall. The nearly liquefied heaven-earth Yuan Qi made the Sword of Gojosian feel both excited and fearful. Any cultivator would yearn for pure and rich heaven-earth Yuan Qi, but when they truly experienced it, they realized that the overly pure and rich heaven-earth Yuan Qi actually made them apprehensive. Speaking of which, the Yuan liquid was much purer and richer than the heaven-earth Yuan Qi here, But the problem was that when the sword of Gojoseon cultivated, they would not recklessly consume the yuan liquid. Instead, they would consume an appropriate amount and immediately refine it, depending on their body's tolerance. But this place was different. There was an abundance of pure and rich heaven-earth yuan qi everywhere. They did not need to actively absorb it as it wrapped around their bodies and drilled into their bodies. If they actively absorbed it, it would be like a storm. Their meridians would not be able to withstand it, and their bodies would not be able to withstand it, ultimately causing their bodies to explode and die. For a sword of Gojoseon to be worried that his body would explode from the overly pure and rich heaven-earth yuan qi, it had to be said that this was a great irony. All sword of Gojoseon are prohibited from using sword techniques. After a discussion among the 10 high-ranking sword of Gojoseon, they jointly issued this order. Anyone who violated this order would be executed by the combined efforts of the 10 high-ranking sword of Gojoseon. There was no other way. The heaven-earth yuan qi here was too pure and rich, and once a sword technique was used, it would often affect the surrounding environment. It could be imagined that if a sword technique was used in this place, it was very likely that a yuan qi storm would appear. A yuan qi storm was a terrifying thing. In the front hall's environment, a yuan qi storm would definitely sweep away all the yuan qi in the hall. The storm that was formed was absolutely terrifying. Once it appeared, not many of the sword of Gojoseon present would be able to survive. It was even possible that all of them would die. While the other sword of Gojoseon were both excited and worried, Chu-Mu did not have such worries. Without any hesitation, he used the divine wilderness sword art. 10 breaths of time was actually very short. It would pass in the blink of an eye. The Empyrean sword origin constantly compressed and condensed, becoming more and more condensed and fine. In the end, it turned into a golden energy. Apart from Chu-Mu himself, no one else knew that the sword origin in his body had undergone a huge change in just 10 seconds. The divine desolate sword technique could be considered a secret technique that could increase one's strength. Furthermore, it could increase one's strength by 10 times. This was a level that other secret techniques could not achieve. Other secret techniques that could increase one's strength by 3 times were already very terrifying. Secret techniques that could increase one's strength by 4 or 5 times were extremely rare. All secret techniques had side effects. Most secret techniques had similar side effects, which were a burden on the body or a loss of blood essence. Once the duration of the secret technique was over, the user would feel weak, uncomfortable, and so on. However, the divine desolate sword technique was different. The only side effect was the consumption of sword origin. The divine desolate sword technique constantly compressed and condensed the sword origin. In the end, the quality of the sword origin would be increased by 10 times, causing the quantity of sword origin to greatly decrease. Furthermore, once the divine desolate sword technique was used, regardless of whether one attacked or not, the sword origin would be constantly consumed. If not for Chu-Mu's precise and unique control of the sword origin, he would have tried his best to use the least amount of energy in exchange for the greatest power. Even so, the divine desolate sword origin could not withstand the consumption for a long period of time. At most, it could last for an hour. But now, he did not have such concerns. Because the environment here, the heaven-earth yuan qi here was too pure and too rich. In just 10 breaths of time, Chu-Mu's strength had silently increased by at least 10 times. Now, in terms of the power of his sword origin, he was not inferior to the Samsung sword of Gojoseon. Once he attacked, his attack power would be even more tyrannical. He could completely wipe out any Samsung sword of Gojoseon present. Of course, the intermediate sword of Gojoseon and the advanced sword of Gojoseon that had their cultivation suppressed were different. Although their sword origin was suppressed to the level of the third heaven of creation realm, the quality of their sword origin was not significantly suppressed. It was still more than 10 times purer than the real Samsung sword of Gojoseon. Naturally, their strength was also stronger. No matter what, Chu-Mu, who had used the divine desolate sword technique, already possessed powerful strength. Coupled with his exquisite sword techniques and outstanding battle talent, he even had the confidence to contend with the advanced sword of Gojoseon here. Of course, whether he could really contend with them, Chu-Mu did not dare to be certain. Powerful energy flowed within his body. Wisps of heaven-earth yuan qi constantly entered his body through his pores, restoring the divine desolate sword origin that was slowly being consumed. This allowed the divine desolate sword origin to be maintained at its peak state. Chu-Mu was in high spirits, but he kept a low profile. Standing in the crowd, he was not eye-catching at all. Even so, Chu-Mu could still feel a few fierce gazes piercing through the sky, piercing through the dense heaven-earth yuan qi and landing on his body. He turned his head and saw two Sword of Gojoseon staring at him with fierce and murderous gazes. Those two eyes were filled with resentment and anger, as if a tsunami was about to swallow him up. They were the two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart Pavilion. Chu-Mu did not see the other three Samsung Sword of Gojoseon. Perhaps they had died in the battle with the spirit of the Sword Chi. Even an intermediate Sword of Gojoseon had died, so it was not strange for a Samsung Sword of Gojoseon to die. Chu-Mu, you deserve to die. A voice filled with hatred that could not be washed away by the torrential river was like a cold wind blowing through the gaps in the hall. The two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart Pavilion were filled with hatred. Their bodies exuded an incomparably fierce, murderous aura. Using strange footwork, they shuttled through the crowd, moving forward from left and right like poisonous snakes, rapidly approaching Chu-Mu. The sudden change alarmed the other Sword of Gojoseon in the front hall. Their attention was immediately attracted to the two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart Pavilion. They could feel the incomparably fierce, murderous aura from their bodies. They had locked onto someone and were charging towards that person at lightning speed. In the next moment, two incomparably resplendent sword light were unsheathed. It was so cold and fierce that it was difficult to look at it directly. The Sword of Gojoseon were shocked to discover that the target of the two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon, whose cultivation had been suppressed, was actually a two-star Sword of Gojoseon. If they were not mistaken, that was indeed a two-star Sword of Gojoseon whose cultivation was only at the second heavenly layer of Fate Realm. In this front hall filled with Samsung Sword of Gojoseon, a two-star Sword of Gojoseon who had suddenly attracted everyone's attention was very conspicuous. Immediately, some people took pleasure in the misfortune of others. They believed that this two-star Sword of Gojoseon would die without a doubt. Indeed, in their understanding, it was already very surprising that a two-star Sword of Gojoseon, who was extremely talented and powerful, could defeat an ordinary Samsung Sword of Gojoseon. Moreover, the intermediate Sword of Gojoseon whose cultivation had been suppressed was still far stronger than an ordinary Samsung Sword of Gojoseon, not to mention that the two of them were working together. As soon as the two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart Tower rushed over, Chu-Mu transmitted his voice to Bawang, asking him how to cooperate. Bawang secretly nodded. His eyes shone with a fierce and domineering light as he stared at the intermediate Sword of Gojoseon who was rushing over from the left and had already drawn his sword. With his strength, he was naturally not a match for an intermediate Sword of Gojoseon. Even if it was just an intermediate Sword of Gojoseon whose cultivation had been suppressed to the third heavenly layer of Fate Realm, he could still stall for time. What Chu-Mu needed was that little bit of time. The two intermediate Sword of Gojoseon from Broken Heart Tower did not dare to use their sword skills. They did not want to die, so they had to get close to Chu-Mu and use their sword skills to kill Chu-Mu swiftly and fiercely to vent the hatred in their hearts. This was exactly what Chu-Mu wanted. He loosened and clenched the 5 fingers of his right hand several times, causing his palm and fingers to relax. Finally, he bent them slightly in a natural posture, which was the most suitable for an instant explosion. The light in Chu Mu's eyes was restrained, reflecting the two intermediate sword of Gojosian who were rapidly approaching from the left and right. He silently calculated the best time to attack and how to directly kill the two intermediate sword of Gojosian in the shortest time possible. But on second thought, in this place where there were so many people, he did not know what would happen next. He should hide his strength and not expose too much of his strength. However, he could not let others think that he was a pushover either. He calculated again and grasped the right angle. That was why he transmitted his voice to Bawang to attack. The sword of Gojosian around Chu Mu had already retreated, leaving an empty space. They did not want to be involved. Even Bawang had walked to the side under Chu Mu's transmission. Among the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojosian, 3 of them had been staring at Chu Mu. They wanted to see how this young sword of Gojosian, who could resist the attack of a level 3 commander sword of Gojosian, would deal with the attacks of 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian. If necessary, they would take action and save Chu Mu's life. After all, this young sword of Gojosian was very talented. In an instant, different thoughts flashed through the minds of every sword of Gojosian. 2 incomparably sharp sword light condensed with astonishing killing intent streaked across the sky, one slashing and one piercing, wanting to kill Chu Mu. In an instant, Bawang made his move. With a flick of his whip sword, he pierced forward. The sharp sound of air breaking made the scalps of the surrounding sword of Gojosian tingle. Bawang's sudden attack was out of the expectations of an intermediate sword of Gojosian from Heartbroken Pavilion. Fortunately, he had considered this possibility and hurriedly retreated. The price was that he could not continue to cooperate with another person to kill Chu Mu. However, even if a mere 2-star sword of Gojosian was extremely talented and powerful, he was definitely not a match for a 6th-order sword of Gojosian whose cultivation had been suppressed. That's right, the sword of Gojosian who was thrusting his sword at Chu Mu was actually a 6th-order sword of Gojosian. Just as Chu Mu's throat was about to be pierced by that sharp sword light, Chu Mu moved. His figure swayed and his left foot took a step forward, seemingly in a sorry state as he narrowly avoided the sharp sword light. As if he had expected Chu Mu's dodge, the sword that was thrusting out paused and directly slashed to the right, as if wanting to cut through Chu Mu's neck. His footwork changed, his figure changed, and he dodged again and again. The sword light also changed accordingly, each move aimed at a vital point. When the other sword of Gojosian saw that Chu Mu was not only not killed by the sword, but also dodged, they were all at a loss for words. Chapter 1034. In the pure and rich front hall, more than 2,000 sword of Gojosian formed an encirclement. In the middle, there was a cold and sharp sword light flashing, crushing the white yuan qi flow. Bawang was holding back one of the intermediate sword of Gojosian, but he was in a precarious situation. His body had already been slashed by the other party's sharp sword several times, and there were wounds all over his body. Fortunately, his physique was many times stronger than a human 2-star sword of Gojosian, and even stronger than Chu Mu. His self-healing ability was also quite strong, and in addition to his innate speed, reflexes, and combat talent, he was able to withstand a few attacks without being killed. Even so, Bawang's body was still dripping with blood. The sharp sword qi had invaded his body, making him feel very uncomfortable. However, Bawang's face was fierce, as if the wounds on his body were fake. Bawang only had one thought, and that was to hold back this intermediate sword of Gojosian so that he could not attack Chu Mu. Even if he died, he had to hold back this intermediate sword of Gojosian. Who is this? A mere 2-star sword of Gojosian can actually resist the attack of an intermediate sword of Gojosian. The sword of Gojosian were surprised by Bawang's strength and tenacity, but they were even more surprised by Chu Mu. This was because Bawang had suffered many injuries under the other party's sword. It seemed that he could not withstand a few more attacks. On the other hand, although Chu Mu was dodging in a somewhat embarrassing manner, he did not seem to have been hit by the other party's sword. No matter how one looked at it, he was better than Bawang. While dodging, Chu Mu moved towards Bawang. He had also seen Bawang's predicament. Everything was under his careful calculation. After getting close to Bawang, Chu Mu suddenly accelerated and moved to the side, just in time to avoid the sword light. The sharp sword of Gojoseon stabbed towards the side of another intermediate sword of Gojoseon. The sword of Gojoseon had all reached the stage of one with the sword. The sword moved at will and stopped at will. Therefore, this intermediate sword of Gojoseon immediately stopped his sword and turned to slash at Chu Mu, who was dodging to the side. The change was so fast that an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojoseon would find it difficult to dodge. It was also at this moment that Chu Mu attacked. The Frenzy Thunder's sacred sword turned into a blazing white thunderbolt. It tore through the air and pierced towards the back of the intermediate sword king who was madly attacking the overlord, where the heart was. Damn it! The sudden change made the two intermediate sword of Gojoseon's face change. The intermediate sword of Gojoseon, who was attacking Bawang, had no time to dodge. The intermediate sword of Gojoseon, who was about to kill Chu Mu, quickly changed his sword technique and stabbed towards Chu Mu's sword again. He had to save his junior brother first. This was exactly what Chu Mu wanted. The stab was just a feint. It disappeared under the opponent's sword and burst out with an unparalleled speed, like a lightning bolt that tore the sky. The eyelids of the sword of Gojoseon around suddenly twitched. Their hearts trembled, and a chill emerged for no reason. Their eyes only caught the trajectory of an instant. A blazing white light flashed past in an instant, carrying Chu Mu and the intermediate sword of Gojoseon. The sword of Gojoseon rushed 1.5 meters away and stopped. Turning around, the sword once again turned into a blazing white lightning bolt that tore the void. Under the earth-shaking force, the rules of gold, and the exquisite sword technique, the sword tore apart the intermediate sword of Gojoseon's protective sword aura, tore apart his treasured clothes, and also tore apart his inner armor. With only a slight obstruction, the tip of the sword slashed across the back of the intermediate sword of Gojoseon. There seemed to be a teeth-numbing and bone-numbing sound. Chu Mu's sword cut off the spine of the intermediate sword of Gojoseon. The terrifying earth-shaking force vibrated, causing the wound to expand and shatter. Blood instantly spurted out. The terrifying sword light pierced through the body of the intermediate sword of Gojoseon, aiming directly at the heart, directly piercing and crushing it. The intermediate sword of Gojoseon seemed to hear the sound of an explosion. He only felt an unbearable pain in his body. He opened his mouth, and a mouthful of blood spurted out like a spring, directly spraying it on his junior brother. The sudden splash of blood made the intermediate sword of Gojoseon dumbfounded for a moment. He was dumbfounded, but Bawang was not. After being attacked continuously, there were at least 12 wounds on his body, deep to the bone. If not for the fact that he was not a human, but a savage beast whose bloodline had mutated many times and whose vitality was incomparably tenacious, he would probably have fallen to the ground and died. Even if his purpose was to delay the intermediate sword of Gojoseon, he still had a grudge in his heart. Now that he finally had a chance to counterattack, how could Bawang let it go? He did not use any sword skills, but instead erupted with the most tyrannical power. He swung his sword, and the incomparably sharp sword tip pierced through the white yuan qi flow, leaving behind a subtle but astonishing trajectory. It was an incomparably sharp sword. The invasion of murderous intent made the intermediate sword of Gojoseon's hair stand on end. At this time, he could no longer care about why there was a large mass of blood pouring over his head. He hurriedly drew his sword, breaking apart Bawang's whip sword, and then stabbed out. The sword that was sure to kill was about to pierce through Bawang's head. A hint of despair flashed across Bawang's eyes. That was a sword that he had erupted with all his strength. If he could not kill his opponent, he would be in a difficult situation. The despair in his eyes turned into determination. Even if he had to die, he would not let his opponent live. In the blink of an eye, a sword light, as if it had come from the heavens, directly broke apart the killing sword of Gojosian. Then, with the help of the recoil, it shot towards the neck of the intermediate sword of Gojosian at an even faster speed. In the eyes of the intermediate sword of Gojosian, the lightning-like white sword light was reflected. It was full of shock, and then it turned into disbelief and despair. With a poochie sound, a head flew high into the air. The muscles of the neck that had been cut off contracted, and blood spurted out like a fountain, making a hissing sound. The more than 2,000 sword of Gojosian were all dumbfounded. The scene that had happened in front of them was like a dream. A 2-star sword of Gojosian had actually killed 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian. It was an unbelievable thing. After killing the 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian, Bawang quickly took out some pills and sprinkled them on his wound. He also took out some pills to replenish his blood. Although his self-healing ability was outstanding, it would be even faster with the help of pills. Under the effects of his self-healing ability and the pills, the wounds on Bawang's body quickly healed. However, because he had lost a lot of blood, his face looked a little pale. Chu Mu took the space rings of the 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian and so on. These were his spoils of war. Although some people were envious, no one wanted to snatch them. The advanced sword of Gojosian had their own status, and the space rings of the 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian were not enough to tempt them. The intermediate sword of Gojosian saw the fate of the 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian and did not dare to make an enemy out of Chu Mu. They were afraid that they would die under Chu Mu's sword. As for the Samsung sword of Gojosian, it was needless to say. His swordsmanship is profound, his grasp of timing is very precise, and he is adept at using his surroundings. A advanced sword of Gojosian evaluated. The other advanced sword of Gojosian nodded. Looking at the previous battle, Chu Mu had constantly dodged. Although he was in a sorry state, he could still dodge. This showed that his grasp of timing was very precise. Then, he used the other intermediate sword of Gojosian to kill the 2 intermediate sword of Gojosian one by one. This showed his exquisite swordsmanship and his ability to use his surroundings. He is indeed a very talented junior. In the future, he will definitely be able to compete with us, but now. Another advanced sword of Gojosian evaluated. Chu Mu's performance was indeed worthy of their attention, but they did not feel that he was a threat. At least, he was not a threat in this place. As for the future, that was a matter for the future. No one could say for sure. At the end of the battle, Chu Mu's divine wilderness sword essence was not depleted at all. This was because the heaven-earth yuan qi here was too rich. Just a slight depletion would immediately restore it to its peak. What do we do now? A sword of Gojosian asked. Everyone's attention was diverted. They had entered the true essence hall wholeheartedly. Now that they were in the front hall, what should they do next? Everyone looked at the dozen advanced sword of Gojosian. They should be the clearest about this place. Wait. A advanced sword of Gojosian only said one word. The other advanced sword of Gojosian only nodded. Wait. If that was the case, then they would wait. Without being able to cultivate or use sword techniques, the waiting time seemed to be a little long. Some of the advanced sword of Gojosian had thoughts and ran over to Chu Mu to make friends. Brother Chu, how are you? My name is Sun Sun. Brother Chu's talent is unprecedented and will never be surpassed. Brother Chu's sword techniques are really unfathomable. It's amazing, they were not fools. They could see that Chu Mu's talent was too shocking. Once he matured, his future achievements would be immeasurable. For such a person, it was best not to make an enemy out of him. Even if they could not become friends, they could treat him as an unrelated person. However, if there was a chance to become friends, they would naturally not let it go. In an instant, Chu-Mu felt a headache coming on as he faced the numerous advanced sword of Gojosian. He could only deal with them perfunctorily and wait. After an unknown amount of time, just as the advanced sword of Gojosian were feeling impatient, they felt a tremor beneath their feet. The scattered heaven-earth yuan qi floating in the air seemed to be attracted and flowed towards a direction. Gradually, the void in the front hall seemed to be pierced by an invisible hand and then violently ripped open. A hole appeared and the hole continued to expand, releasing a terrifying suction force. The advanced sword of Gojosian's expression changed greatly and they hurriedly retreated. Their faces were solemn and filled with hope as they stared at the space door that was forming. They immediately understood that the space door that was about to appear should be the real place. The front hall of the Palace of True Essence was just a stop, a place to wait. Time passed slowly and a huge hole was torn open in the void. There was only darkness inside, as dark as the abyss of hell. One look was enough to make one's heart palpitate, as if a terrifying demon was hiding inside. The terrifying suction force slowly decreased and finally disappeared. The space door was completely stabilized, showing the 2000 advanced sword of Gojosian a new place, waiting for them to enter. It should be inside. One of the advanced sword of Gojosian said in an uncertain tone as he stared at the dark space door. Let's go. Another advanced sword of Gojosian said solemnly and took the lead to rush out. Chapter 1035. In the blink of an eye, the front hall became empty. Not a single person remained. Even the dense yuan qi of heaven and earth became extremely thin. So many origin crystals, at least high-grade origin crystals, and there are even top-grade origin crystals. They're mine, they're all mine. Someone lost his composure and cried out. It resounded in the surroundings and entered everyone's eardrums, immediately creating chaos. Get lost, I found them first. The voice was filled with irritation. The aura was chaotic. Sword light flashed, shooting out sword rays. When Chu-Mu's eyes could see clearly, he was instantly stunned. The scene was extremely chaotic. The sword of Gojosian that had originally fought side by side had now turned into enemies, fighting and attacking each other. Their goal was to snatch even more origin crystals. So many origin crystals! With a glance, Chu-Mu couldn't help but be stunned. This place was even more spacious than the front hall. The yuan qi of heaven and earth in the air seemed to be even purer and denser than the front hall. However, not many people paid attention to this because they were all attracted by the origin crystals. Each of them seemed to have lost their minds. Even the breathing of the 10 or so high-grade sword of Gojosian became hurried. They were extremely excited and quickly collected the origin crystals. They mainly collected top-grade origin crystals. A top-grade origin crystal was equivalent to 100 high-grade origin crystals. It could even be exchanged for 120 high-grade origin crystals. It was no small matter. With a boom, Chu-Mu and Bawang exploded at the same time. They turned into two streaks of light and rushed towards the origin crystals. There were so many origin crystals piled up like two mountains in front of them. If they didn't collect some, they would be letting themselves down. Chu-Mu's target was naturally the top-grade origin crystals. However, he intentionally avoided the 10 or so high-grade sword of Gojosian and didn't cause any conflict with them. Although the amount of origin crystals he collected wasn't as much as theirs, Chu-Mu was still satisfied. The Overlord, on the other hand, was collecting high-grade crystals. The small mountain of high-grade origin crystals was more than 10 times larger than the small mountain of top-grade origin crystals. By rough estimation, the small mountain of high-grade origin crystals had at least 1 billion origin crystals, while the number of top-grade origin crystals exceeded 100 million. Other than Chu-Mu and a dozen advanced sword of Gojosian, some of the powerful intermediate sword of Gojosian were also fighting for the ultimate crystals. Scram! An intermediate sword of Gojosian's eyes turned red as he swung his sword at Chu-Mu, intending to send Chu-Mu flying so that he could collect the intermediate-grade origin crystals. Chu-Mu was already prepared. Without any hesitation, he unsheathed his violent thunder-sacred sword, which turned into a thunderbolt that pierced through the air. Using the earth-shaking force to its maximum extent, he slashed at the intermediate sword of Gojoseon head-on. An incomparably ear-piercing sound rang out, causing one's scalp to go numb. The terrifying vibrational force impacted the intermediate sword of Gojoseon's sharp sword. The impact spread from his palm to his arm, causing his body to violently tremble. His expression changed drastically as he spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. The power of this sword was impressive, causing the other intermediate sword of Gojoseon to sober up. They didn't dare to have any ideas about Chu-Mu. Not long after, the two mountains of origin crystals were divided up by the sword of Gojoseon. Every sword of Gojoseon had a harvest, more or less. If one were to talk about the ones with the greatest gains, it should be those dozen over high-level sword kings. The top-grade origin crystals that they collected were at least 3 to 4 million each. 3 to 4 million top-grade origin crystals was already several times the wealth of the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon. It made them so happy that they couldn't close their mouth. However, when they looked at the other intermediate sword of Gojoseon, a trace of ruthlessness flashed in their eyes. They seemed to be considering whether they should attack and kill these intermediate sword of Gojoseon who had snatched the top-grade origin crystals and take their interspatial rings. These intermediate sword of Gojoseon weren't stupid. They immediately retreated and looked at the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon with vigilant eyes. If necessary, they would join forces to fight back. The dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon also retracted their gazes. Although having more origin crystals was a good thing, they had to attack. Once they attacked, there would be casualties. Their main goal in entering the True Essence Hall wasn't these origin crystals. These origin crystals were just a bonus. At this time, the origin chi of heaven and earth in the middle hall flowed and gathered again. It was almost the same as the scene in the front hall. The invisible hand tore through the void and another spatial door appeared. This time, the sword of Gojoseon didn't hesitate at all. They all used their movement techniques and shot towards the spatial door. The True Essence Hall was divided into the front hall, middle hall, and back hall. Now, the sword of Gojoseon had entered the back hall. The middle hall was larger than the front hall, and the origin chi of heaven and earth was purer and denser than the front hall. There were also 2 origin crystal mountains. The back hall was larger than the middle hall, and the origin chi of heaven and earth was purer and denser than the middle hall. However, there weren't any origin crystal mountains. However, every sword of Gojoseon's eyes widened and their breathing quickened. Even the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon were no exception. Their faces were flushed and their bodies were trembling. Their eyes reflected the tall and dense trees. Chu-Mu's eyes widened and his throat trembled. His face was filled with shock as he stared in front of him. True essence trees, one true essence tree after another. Tall and dense true essence trees. Taking a closer look, there were a total of 9 true essence trees. One of them was in the middle and was the tallest. It was about 100 meters tall and had no leaf. Instead, it had countless branches. Hanging from each branch was a fruit that emitted an incomparably rich and pure fluctuation. The trunk and branches of the true essence tree in the middle were purple-gold in color, as if they were cast from a special metal. They looked extremely sturdy and indestructible. The fruits hanging from each branch were the size of an adult's fist. They were round and smooth, and like the trunk, they were purple-gold in color. There were countless complex patterns on their surface, as if they were carefully carved works of art. Extreme. 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 One of the advanced sword of Gojoseon's eyes bulged and his tongue was tied. He was simply unable to speak a complete sentence. Extreme. Extreme grade. Another advanced sword of Gojoseon forced himself to calm down. He took a deep breath and was unable to conceal the shock in his voice as he spoke these two words. Extreme grade. Extreme grade true essence tree. Extreme grade true essence fruit. The one in the middle was actually an extreme grade true essence tree. Each of the fist-sized purple gold fruits covered with mysterious patterns was actually an extreme grade true essence fruit. Perilous waves surged in the hearts of every advanced sword of Gojosian. There really are. The advanced sword of Gojosian, who had come with a purpose, all sighed inwardly. For a moment they were unable to count clearly how many extreme grade true essence fruits there were on the extreme grade true essence tree. However, they were certain that there were at least a few hundred, or perhaps even 1,000. The reason why they were unable to count clearly was because they were stunned and dazzled. The extreme grade true essence tree in the middle was surrounded by 8 other true essence trees, as if they were protecting a king. These 8 true essence trees were about 50 meters tall, and their branches were not as dense as the extreme grade true essence tree in the middle. They were pale gold in color, as if they were cast from gold. They were filled with a luxurious artistic aura. On the branches of each true essence tree hung many fruit. Just like the branches of the tree, the fruits were also pale gold in color. They were about half the size of an adult's fist, and their skin was also covered with patterns. However, they were not as dense and clear as the extreme grade true essence fruit. They emitted a pure and rich yuan qi fluctuation. Although it was not as dense as the extreme grade true essence fruit, it was still very shocking. High grade true essence tree. The extreme grade true essence tree and the extreme grade true essence fruit were the most eye-catching. After being shocked by the extreme grade true essence tree and the extreme grade true essence fruit, when they saw the extreme grade true essence tree and the extreme grade true essence fruit, they were not completely shocked. However, they were still very excited and their hearts were trembling. This was because there was not only one extreme grade true essence tree, but 8 of them. Each extreme grade true essence tree had many extreme grade true essence fruit. Each of them was full and heavy, attracting the eyes of the sword of Gojosian, making them unable to move away. Some of the sword of Gojosian, who had done some research on the true essence secret realm, knew that it was possible to find true essence trees and pick true essence fruits inside the true essence secret realm. In fact, at least 1/3 of the sword of Gojosian, who had entered the true essence secret realm, had picked true essence fruit. However, those true essence trees and true essence fruits were only of the low grade. The sword of Gojosian was divided into 9 stars, and was further divided into 3 major stages. The low-grade sword of Gojosian, the middle-grade sword of Gojosian, and the high-grade sword of Gojosian. The true essence fruits were also divided into stages. The low-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the low-grade sword of Gojosian. The middle-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the middle-grade sword of Gojosian, and the high-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the high-grade sword of Gojosian. If the true essence trees here were the same as outside, only of the low grade, then the middle-grade sword of Gojosian and the high-grade sword of Gojosian wouldn't even look at them, let alone lose their composure. If these true essence trees and true essence fruits were of the middle grade, then the high-grade sword of Gojosian wouldn't even look at them. The problem was that there were no ifs. These true essence trees were truly of the high grade, and one of them was of the highest grade. The true essence fruits on them were also of the highest grade. Every sword of Gojosian was moved. Many sword of Gojosian swallowed their saliva with difficulty, and their throats wriggled. The high-grade true essence fruit was useful for the high-grade sword of Gojosian, and naturally it was also useful for the low-grade and middle-grade sword of Gojosian. If the low-grade sword of Gojosian consumed the high-grade true essence fruit, the effect would naturally be excellent. However, on the other hand, the high-grade true essence fruit contained a vast amount of true essence qi, which was not something that the low-grade sword of Gojosian could bear. Only the middle-grade sword of Gojosian with a tyrannical body could barely bear it and slowly refine and absorb it. But in any case, if they could obtain some high-grade true essence fruits, or even top-grade true essence fruits, whether it was for their own use or to exchange for the treasures they needed, it would be an excellent thing. Moved, incomparably moved, the hearts of the 2,000 sword of Gojoseon were trembling. High-grade true essence fruit, top-grade true essence fruit. Now, let's talk about how to distribute these top-grade true essence fruits and high-grade true essence fruits. After a long time, a high-grade sword of Gojoseon said, "That's right." The other high-grade sword of Gojoseon agreed. In fact, in their hearts, they wanted to monopolize all the high-grade and top-grade true essence fruits, but their remaining reason told them that it was impossible. Not to mention that there were other high-grade sword of Gojoseon with similar strength to them, just the other middle-grade and low-grade sword of Gojoseon alone. Once they joined forces, a high-grade sword of Gojoseon whose cultivation was suppressed would not be able to contend against them. If they ate the meat, they had to let others drink the soup, so as not to arouse public anger and lead to a big conflict. In the end, not only would they gain nothing, they might even die here. Chapter 1036. In the back hall of the True Essence Palace, an astonishingly dense and pure yuan qi drifted about, making the entire palace look like it was shrouded in clouds. 8 upper-grade true essence fruits surrounded the only peak-grade true essence fruit. The gazes of the sword of Gojoseon moved away from the true essence fruit with great difficulty, landing on the face of the high-grade sword of Gojoseon who had spoken. The dozen or so high-grade sword of Gojoseon had unknowingly moved closer to each other, as if they were about to join forces. I roughly counted. There are a total of 19,000 to 20,000 upper-grade true essence fruits, and more than 3,000 peak-grade true essence fruit. The high-grade sword of Gojoseon glanced at the true essence tree, then retracted his gaze and said slowly, "After the 13 of us discussed, we came to the same decision. The 3,000 peak-grade true essence fruits will be divided among the 13 of us." As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of the sword of Gojoseon changed drastically. "What?" Another high-grade sword of Gojoseon coldly snorted, like thunder exploding in everyone's ears. His gaze was like cold lightning sweeping across the void. There seemed to be a faint buzzing sound that made one's scalp go numb. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he said, "Could it be that you want a share of the peak-grade true essence fruits? Not to mention the fact that you can't consume the peak-grade true essence fruits. Just the news of you obtaining them is enough to kill you the moment you leave the true essence secret realm." As soon as these words came out, the other sword of Gojoseon seemed to have been splashed with cold water. Their entire bodies trembled, and their expressions changed drastically. Indeed, even if they obtained the peak-grade true essence fruits, they still couldn't consume them. Consuming them would only be courting death. Of course, they could exchange them for other treasures, but the problem was that once they left the true essence secret realm, these high-grade sword of Gojoseon would recover their full strength, and they could kill them in one move. Furthermore, even if they were lucky enough to escape, someone might spread the news, which would be a big problem. However, they were very unwilling to accept this. Now let me finish. Speaking of the distribution of the sword of Gojoseon, a faint smile appeared on his face. The top-grade true origin fruits will be divided equally between us, and the top-grade true origin fruits will be taken by each of us. The rest will be yours. However, in the world of swordsmen, the strong are respected. I suggest that we divide them according to strength. There were 13 high-ranked sword of Gojoseon, each of them 1,000 superior grade quintessence fruits. That would be 13,000 superior grade quintessence fruit. There were probably more than 6,000 superior grade quintessence fruits left. 6,000 pills might sound like a lot, but if one thought about it carefully, there were more than 2,000 sword of Gojoseon present. If everyone were to distribute the pills, they would only get about 3 pills. However, if they were to be distributed according to strength, those mid-ranked sword of Gojoseon who were stronger could naturally get more, while the weaker sword of Gojosian might not even get a single quintessence fruit. More than a dozen high-ranked sword of Gojosian obviously wanted to join forces. They also brought in some mid-ranked sword of Gojosian and low-ranked sword of Gojosian. They gathered around them, forming a group of more than 100 people. Think about it carefully. Do you want to fight with us for some quintessence fruits and die under our swords, or do you want to get the quintessence fruits that belong to you and leave the quintessence secret realm safely? Another high-ranked sword of Gojosian said. Perhaps some people were not afraid of death, but they wanted to die with value and meaning. If they died without meaning, they would only be treated as a topic of idle gossip. Therefore, even though many sword of Gojosian were very unwilling in their hearts, they could only forcibly endure it. There was no other way. It was all because of strength, because they were not strong enough. Even when facing other mid-ranked and high-ranked sword of Gojosian whose cultivation was suppressed to the same level as their own, the purity of their sword origin was still too inferior. The difference was at least 10 times or even 100 times. Coupled with the power of divine sense, the mastery and application of the rules, and so on, the gap in strength was even more obvious. Therefore, once they started fighting, and in the case of more than a dozen high-ranked sword of Gojosian teaming up with nearly 100 mid-ranked and low-ranked sword of Gojosian, there was no advantage at all. What's more, who would be willing to die first and let others reap the benefits? If they could not confide in each other, they could not really join forces to fight. If they were not strong enough, they could only swallow their anger. The principle of distribution was thus decided. Although Chumu was a 2-star sword of Gojosian, the strength he had shown was superior to many mid-ranked sword of Gojosian. Naturally, he would also be given some high-grade vital origin fruit. As for how many, it was not clear at the moment. Chumu did not refute, because he knew that with his strength, he was not qualified to refute, unless he could fight against those high-ranked sword of Gojosian. Just as the high-ranked sword of Gojosian were about to pick the vital origin fruits, a gust of wind blew in from the rear hall. It blew the rich yuan qi of heaven and earth, forming countless cyclones that circled endlessly in the rear hall. The sudden change startled the sword of Gojosian and made them very vigilant. The rear hall was sealed, so it was impossible for wind to blow in. However, the appearance of wind out of nowhere was abnormal. Whistling sounds could be heard as countless cyclones circled the surroundings, causing the robes of the sword of Gojosian to sway. Countless milky white cyclones swept towards the vital origin trees. With a whistling sound, they passed by the high-grade vital origin trees and finally gathered at the base of the top-grade vital origin trees. Everyone saw a point that they had overlooked. Under the top-grade vital origin trees there was a small ball of light. Inside the ball of light there seemed to be something like a shadow. As large amounts of milky white cyclones poured in, the ball of light continued to grow. Finally, it expanded to a height of about 2 meters. Inside there was a human figure. The remaining cyclones dissipated and turned back into yuan qi of heaven and earth. The density of the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the rear hall had clearly decreased by a lot. It was only about 1/10 of the previous density, but it was still much denser than the outside world. Chumu could still maintain the divine wilderness sword essence at its peak state. Even if it was consumed by using sword techniques, it could still quickly recover. The fact that the density of the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the rear hall had decreased to 1/10 of the previous density had an advantage. That was, the sword of Gojosian could use sword techniques without worrying that the sword techniques would cause a terrifying yuan qi storm. But now, their attention was completely focused on the 2-meter-tall ball of light. No, it should be said that they were focused on the human figure inside the ball of light. The black silhouette turned from blurry to clear, and the ball of light seemed to be absorbed by the silhouette inside. As the human figure gradually became clearer, a terrifying energy fluctuation was gradually emitted. It swept out like an invisible storm, sweeping past everyone's bodies, causing their bodies to tremble and their scalps to feel numb. Every sword of Gojoseon had a serious expression. "What is that?" a high-grade sword of Gojoseon whispered. From the human figure that gradually appeared, he felt a huge threat. Finally, the ball of light was completely absorbed, and the human figure inside was also clearly visible. He was the height of a normal human, and his appearance was similar to that of a human. However, his head was bald, and there was not a single strand of hair. His facial features were clear, and he looked very cold, as if he was carved. His eyes were emotionless, and there was only death and indifference. On his body, the energy of the ball of light naturally condensed into a long robe. The color of the long robe looked very complicated, as if it was formed by countless patterns. These patterns intertwined, and there were a total of 4 colors: gold, green, blue, and purple. Each of them emitted a shocking energy fluctuation. It looked like a high and mighty emperor, using his pair of cold eyes to look down on the world. This is the Sword Chi Spirit, 4 colors, 4 types of power of law. It is the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit. All the sword of Gojoseon's hearts almost jumped out of their throats. The legendary Emperor rank sword Aura Spirit had actually appeared in front of them. The true energy secret realm opened once every 100 years, and it had already opened dozens of times. This meant that the true energy secret realm had been opened for thousands of years. In these thousands of years, the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit had appeared less than 3 times. Every time it appeared, it was accompanied by a storm of blood. In the records, it seemed that every time the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit appeared, a large number of Sword of Gojoseon would die. The number of Sword of Gojoseon that could leave alive was extremely small. If the records were true, it meant that this time they were in danger. Every Sword of Gojoseon's face turned ugly, especially the 13 high-tier Sword of Gojoseon who came with a purpose. They all looked as if their parents had died. They never expected to meet an Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit. That was a fierce character that they might not meet even after opening the true energy secret realm more than 10 times. The Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit's cold eyes swept across everyone. Everyone couldn't help but shiver, as if a cold current had run up their spines. Immediately after, the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit reached out its right hand and grabbed at the air. With a whistling sound, the air flowed and gathered, and a Chi sword appeared in its hand. The entire Chi sword appeared to be intertwined with 4 different colors, as if it had been forged from 4 strange metals countless times. It was a very sharp sword. With the sword in its hand, the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit didn't hesitate at all. It appeared in front of the high-grade true energy tree and swung its sword. A rumbling sound rang out like thunder from the 9 heavens. A huge 4-colored sword of Gojoseon tore through the air like a crescent moon and attacked the 2,000 or so sword of Gojoseon. As soon as the sword was swung, it displayed an unstoppable aura, causing the sword of Gojoseon's faces to all change. "Work together or die for sure," a high-tier sword of Gojoseon yelled out sternly. He pulled out his sword without hesitation and swung it out, using a sword skill. The 2,000 or so sword of Gojoseon all pulled out their swords and used sword skills to fight against the huge Sword Chi. The Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit's Sword Chi attack had reached the Earth rank 4th stage Earth-breaking sword skill. Among the sword of Gojoseon present, even the high-tier sword of Gojoseon couldn't use an Earth rank 4th stage Earth-breaking sword skill because it consumed too much energy. With their sword energy, they could only use it once or twice or 3 times. They had to use it at a crucial moment. Even so, the combined sword skill of the 2,000 or so sword of Gojoseon still shattered the terrifying sword chi of the Emperor-level Sword Chi Spirit. Chapter 1037. More than 2,000 Earth Rank 2 and Rank 3 sword skills collided, causing the Emperor-level Sword Chi's sword chi to shatter. It transformed into a terrifying energy storm that swept up the heaven and earth Yuan Chi in the back palace. It rumbled as if it was going to destroy the heavens and earth as it charged towards the emperor-level sword Chi's spirit. Logically speaking, with so many sword skills attacking and shattering the opponent's powerful sword Chi, it wouldn't consume much energy. On the contrary, because it shattered the opponent's sword Chi, the energy from the explosion would be sucked into it, causing unpredictable changes and forming a terrifying energy storm. The high-tier sword of Gojoseon present knew that even if they recovered all of their cultivation, they wouldn't be able to fight against such a powerful storm. Then, could the Emperor-level sword Chi's spirit fight against it? Yes. They were very sure of it, even though this thought made them very unhappy. If the Emperor-level sword Chi's spirit was so easy to kill, the sword of Gojoseon from before wouldn't have died in the Zhen Yuan secret realm. Facing the terrifying energy storm that could destroy the heavens and earth, the entire back palace seemed to shake. However, the Emperor-level sword Chi's spirit's expression didn't change. Its eyes were still as cold as ever, as if it didn't care about anything. It raised its sword Chi and placed it horizontally in front of its body. Its left hand's index finger and middle finger were like a sword as it lightly brushed across the sword. A bright light appeared at the point where the sword Chi touched the sword, causing people to be unable to open their eyes. In an instant, a resplendent light burst forth from the Chi sword, forming a ring that spread out in all directions. It was like a monstrous wave that swept across the sky. Amidst the rumbling sound, it swept past the terrifying energy storm of the sword technique. Everyone's eyes widened as an incomparably shocking scene appeared. The terrifying energy storm that was like a mountain flood that wanted to destroy a city seemed to have fallen into a swamp, its speed greatly reduced. More than 2,000 sword of Gojoseon were swept by the resplendent light at the same time. Immediately, they felt as if they had fallen into a swamp. The air around them felt sticky, and their every movement was restricted. They had to release even more power, which would undoubtedly increase their consumption. In just an instant, the Emperor-level sword Aura Spirit's sword finger brushed past the Chi sword, and the resplendent light spread out. With the Emperor-level sword Aura Spirit as the center, it spread out in a semicircle, covering the entire back palace. If it was in the air, it would have formed a circle. Looking at it from the outside, it looked like a sphere filled with tiny streams of light. Those streams of light were like strands of drifting sword Chi. Within the sphere, the sword of Gojoseon only felt that their bodies were bound. They even felt that their sword intent, rules, sword essence, and other aspects were suppressed. It was as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. "What is this?" a sword of Gojoseon asked with difficulty. As for the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon, their expressions were extremely ugly. From their expressions they seemed to know what this was, but they were too shocked and couldn't react in time. Chu Mu's expression wasn't good either. Among everyone, he was the weakest under the suppression. Chu Mu vaguely had a guess, but he wasn't sure if it was true. Sword. Domain. An advanced sword of Gojoseon opened his mouth, moved his lips, and said these two words with difficulty. With a boom, it was as if a bolt from the blue had struck their head. Every sword of Gojoseon felt their scalps go numb, and their bodies trembled. Sword Domain. As the sword of Gojoseon of the immemorial world, it was impossible for them not to know what sword domain meant. It was something that they couldn't achieve even if they worked hard for their entire lives. Sword Domain. It represented when one's swordsmanship was cultivated to the true pinnacle. When one's understanding of the sword and swordsmanship reached the pinnacle, they would obtain an opportunity to comprehend a mysterious power that formed a unique domain. In the entire immemorial world, although the human race was declining, the number of swordsmen was still immeasurable. There were too many of them. If there weren't hundreds of billions, there were at least tens of billions. Among so many swordsmen, there were very few who had comprehended sword domain. As for how many there were, they didn't know. They could only be sure that comprehending sword domain was too difficult. Most swordsmen wouldn't be able to grasp it even if they practiced hard for their entire lives. Those who grasped sword domain were the strongest among swordsmen. Every swordsman who grasped sword domain was unparalleled in their generation. No one could compare to them, and their names would be passed down through the ages. The most basic sword domain's function was to suppress the power of others to a certain extent. Whether it was the power of heaven and earth, sword intent, sword essence, etc., they would all be suppressed and weakened. In addition, the person who released the sword domain would be strengthened to a certain extent. In this way, the difference between the two sides would widen. The Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura was already stronger than any of the sword of Gojoseon present. Even if the 13 high-tier sword of Gojoseon teamed up, they wouldn't be the spirit of the sword aura's match unless they recovered their cultivation. Now, the Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura released sword domain and enveloped the surroundings. Its own strength was obviously strengthened. On the other hand, the sword of Gojoseon's sword intent, rule of law, and sword essence were all suppressed and weakened to a certain extent. Their strength decreased, and their every move felt sticky, making them more strenuous. The terrifying sword skill energy storm gradually collapsed under the sword domain's power. As the Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura waved its sword a few times, the terrifying sword skill energy storm immediately disintegrated and dissipated into nothingness. This is sword domain. Chu Mu's voice could only be heard by himself. His heart was trembling because of excitement. Sword domain was one of his goals. He had put in a lot of effort for it and had been cultivating and improving. Now, his sword skills had reached the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain, and his body and spirit had reached the beginning stage of the God realm. As long as he continued to work hard and cultivated his sword skills to the pinnacle of the God realm, he would be able to combine them with the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain. He would then be able to comprehend the sword domain and master it. However, for a long time the sword domain was like a legend. It did exist, but no one had seen it. Chu Mu only knew that he had to cultivate both sword skills to the pinnacle before he was qualified to touch it. However, even if he cultivated both sword skills to the pinnacle, it was still extremely difficult to comprehend the sword domain. Throughout the Archean world, there were countless swordsmen from the human tribe. There were also some outstanding swordsmen who had put in a lot of effort and finally cultivated their sword skills to the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain, and their body and spirit to the pinnacle of the God realm. However, they were stuck at the last step and couldn't comprehend the sword intent. Horizontal and vertical were originally two different directions. How could they be merged when they crossed each other? For a long time, Chu Mu had either used the sword technique domain or the sword technique vertical when he fought. He had also tried to use the sword technique domain and the body and spirit of the sword technique domain at the same time. However, he realized that he couldn't do it at all. Just like day and night, they couldn't exist at the same time. They could only alternate. Therefore, Chu Mu had a feeling that even if he cultivated both sword skills to the pinnacle, it would still be very difficult to comprehend the sword domain by combining them. If he could see it with his own eyes or even feel the real sword domain, it would be different. At least it would leave a mark in his heart. He could slowly comprehend it in the future and his path would be clearer. Therefore, facing the sword domain of the Emperor-level spirit of the sword chi, Chu Mu's thoughts were different from the other sword of Gojoseon. He wasn't fearful, nor was he desperate. Instead, he was excited. Of course, if he wanted to comprehend the sword domain in the future, he had to survive. However, from the current situation, it seemed that the only way to survive was to kill the Emperor-level spirit of the sword chi. We have more than 2,000. If we use all of our strength and don't hold anything back, I don't believe that we can't fight an Emperor-level spirit of the sword chi. An advanced sword of Gojoseon gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. Don't hold anything back. Kill this Emperor-level spirit of the sword Qi. Another advanced sword of Gojosian roared. If we don't live, we will die. The only thing we can do now is fight to the death. Fight to the death. The sword of Gojosian roared in unison. In the midst of despair, after some encouragement, they had the determination to fight to the death. If they didn't die, they would die. There was no other possibility. With such a mentality, each of the sword of Gojosian emitted a sharp and determined aura. Fighting to the death, these sword of Gojosian were able to unleash their strength without fear. The 13 advanced sword of Gojosian all trembled. They used their secret techniques and exploded with powerful auras. Immediately after, they all took out pills and other things from their interspatial rings and quickly consumed them. Rumbling sounds rang out again. The 13 advanced sword of Gojosian's bodies emitted waves of sounds. Terrifying auras of different colors spewed out, forming faint flames that burned fiercely. Using a secret technique and consuming pills to increase their strength, the combination of the two caused each advanced sword of Gojosian's strength to clearly increase by several times. They were even more powerful. In addition, each of the sword of Gojosian used a secret technique. To the sword of Gojosian, secret techniques weren't particularly precious. Almost every sword of Gojosian knew a secret technique. The only difference was the level of the secret technique and the strength of its effect. After using the secret technique, each of the sword of Gojosian's strength increased. A few of the sword of Gojosian even took out pills and consumed them. The effects of the pills exploded, causing their strength to increase again. In this way, they made up for the strength that was weakened by the sword domain to a certain extent. The gap between them and the Emperor-level sword Qi spirit was further reduced. Even though each of the sword of Gojosian used a secret technique and even consumed pills to increase their strength, the Emperor-level sword Qi spirit's face was still indifferent, as if it didn't feel anything. Perhaps it felt that no matter what these people did, it was just a struggle. With such indifference, the pressure it brought to these people was even more obvious. Chu-Mu also used Deshang's burning blood transformation. His body emitted a faint red, flame-like blood mist that swayed and burned, causing his strength to increase by 3 times. Chapter 1038. Boom boom boom. Like volcanoes erupting, the 2000 sword of Gojosian released a shocking aura. Raising their swords, under the lead of the 13 high-leveled sword kings, they split into 4 directions and unleashed their sword techniques towards the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit. The speed of the sword skills were clearly weakened by the sword realm. Their power was also weakened, so they weren't as strong. However, with so many sword skills, they could still threaten the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi. The Emperor-rank sword aura spirit had intelligence that was comparable to humans. It knew that once it was hit, the consequences would be dire. Therefore, it quickly waved its sword, exploding with countless sword auras that blasted in all directions. With the amplification of the sword domain, the sword auras were even faster and more powerful. "Get close to it!" roared an advanced sword of Gojosian. Using sword skills would be weakened too much and would often be broken through. It would be hard to get close to the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi. The only thing they could do now was to get close to it and use sword skills to kill it. Although the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi's sword skills were definitely stronger and more terrifying, they could only hit its body and weaken it by getting close to it. Getting close to it wasn't a blind fight. Instead, it was an organized fight. With the 13 advanced sword of Gojosian leading the charge, they charged at the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi. In an instant they attacked with their sword. Every strike was extremely sharp and powerful. The 13 advanced sword of Gojosian also cooperated with each other to avoid being killed by the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi. In the sword realm, the Emperor-rank spirit of sword Qi was the ruler. The sword in its hand swung out and drew a circle. The terrifying power instantly blew away the 13 advanced sword of Gojosian. Behind it, dozens of intermediate Sword of Gojosian exploded and attacked from all directions. The sword in the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's hand trembled and shot out sword shadows that filled the sky. The terrifying and sharp sword light seemed to pierce through the void and shatter the void. It was unstoppable and indestructible, like a meteor shower or a torrential downpour. Chi-chi-chi sounds rang out, accompanied by shrill screams. Many intermediate Sword of Gojosian were pierced through by the sharp sword light and died instantly. The Emperor rank spirit of Sword Chi quickly moved. In the sword realm, it was as if it had the help of a god. No one could keep up with its speed, let alone surround it. Damn it! In an instant, before the encirclement had any effect, the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Chi destroyed it. More than 10 intermediate Sword of Gojosian were killed. The sword light danced and blood splattered across the sky. Wherever the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Chi passed, one Sword of Gojosian after another was killed. The Emperor rank spirit of Sword Chi, which had intelligence comparable to humans, seemed to understand which Sword of Gojosian were stronger and couldn't be killed in one strike. Therefore, it purposely chose the Sword of Gojosian that couldn't block a single strike of its sword. It was made of Yuan Qi and Sword Qi, so it was very sensitive to Qi. The 13 advanced Sword of Gojosian were the strongest out of all the Sword of Gojosian. Therefore, the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi completely avoided fighting the 13 of them head-on. Instead, it charged into the crowd and killed the other intermediate Sword of Gojosian and lower Sword of Gojosian. Every strike of the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi looked very simple and casual. However, the Sword of Gojosian could faintly see that the simplicity wasn't true. It was the result of thousands of refinements, going from simple to complex, and then from complex to simple. It went straight to the essence of the sword technique. It abandoned all decorations, all extravagance, and all falsehood, leaving only the essence of the sword technique. Kill. Every time he attacked, it was to kill his opponent. Terrifying sword techniques, incomparably sharp sword techniques that made people tremble and feel despair. Wherever the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi swung its sword, it was invincible. Not a single Sword of Gojosian was its match. They all died one after another. Death made people feel despair. It exploded in despair. Even if I die, I will drag one down with me. A Sword of Gojosian facing the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi was in despair. It exploded with unprecedented determination and viciousness. It suddenly compressed its own sword energy, and its body instantly expanded. The moment it was pierced by the spirit of Sword Qi, it exploded. The surrounding Sword of Gojosian all dodged. The terrifying explosion was suppressed by the sword domain and shrunk to a certain range. It just happened to cover the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi. The explosion of an intermediate Sword of Gojosian was undoubtedly very terrifying. Even an advanced Sword of Gojosian would be heavily injured if it didn't die. The shockwave was like a tsunami, but it dissipated under the suppression of the sword domain. The Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi was revealed. 1/3 of its body had been blown apart, leaving 2/3. If it was a human, it would be close to death. However, the spirit of Sword Qi wasn't a human. It was an energy life formed by the combination of Yuan Qi and Sword Qi. Therefore, it didn't die. The surrounding Yuan Qi was immediately attracted and gathered. It let out whistling sounds like a storm. The parts of the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi that had been blown apart quickly recovered. Don't let it recover. An advanced Sword of Gojosian roared in shock and anger. It increased its attacks. Countless sword light attacked like locusts. The recovering Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi swung its sword again and dodged. It shattered a portion of the sword light and dodged a portion of the sword light. In less than 10 breaths of time, its body had completely recovered. It made people feel powerless and despair. A single slash swept through an army. A few more Sword of Gojosian were cut in half and died tragically. The extremely terrifying sword light appeared in front of Chu Mu and slashed towards his neck. The danger of death loomed over him. The shockingly sharp sword light was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper from hell. It emitted a shocking killing intent, causing goosebumps to appear on Chu Mu's neck. A cold current rushed up from the bottom of his feet. All the hair on his body stood on end and his scalp was about to explode. That sword was too fast, so fast that even the power of divine sense could not capture it. His mind went blank. He could only follow his instincts and dodge. At the same time, he used his sword to block the Emperor-rank spirit of Sword Chi's sure-kill attack. A fearsome might was transmitted through the body of the sword. As if struck by lightning, Zhang Xian's body shuddered violently. His bones and muscles felt as if they were about to be torn apart. He was sent flying, and the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had ruptured. He spat out a mouthful of blood and landed heavily 100 meters away. His body felt like it was about to fall apart. He couldn't get up for a moment. Chu Mu's heart was filled with shock. What a terrifying opponent! What a terrifying Emperor-rank spirit of Sword Chi! Just one slash was enough to injure him to this extent. Chu Mu tried his best to regulate his breathing so that his body could recover and move as soon as possible. He struggled to stand up. His body swayed and looked like he was about to fall. It could be said that this was the first time he was in such a sorry state since he started cultivating. That slash allowed Chu Mu to clearly feel the terror of this Emperor-rank spirit of Sword Chi. Although its cultivation was equivalent to the peak of the third sky of creation realm, the purity of its power was 100 or even 1,000 times better than the sword energy of a third sky of creation realm. It wasn't inferior to the 13 high-rank sword of Gojoseon, whose cultivation had been suppressed. In addition, there was a unique power in that slash. It was equivalent to sword intent. It was completely comparable to a top heaven rank sword intent. Combined with 4 top heaven rank power of laws, its power was a tyrannical earth rank 4th grade earth rank sword skill. Furthermore, with the strengthening of the sword domain, its power had increased by several times. Chu Mu was also suppressed and weakened by the sword domain. Under these circumstances, it was as if he was facing an earth rank 5th grade earth rank sword skill when he wasn't suppressed by the sword domain. Facing such a tyrannical and terrifying power, it was fortunate that he wasn't killed and was only severely injured. Chu Mu knew clearly that if he hadn't used the divine desolate sword art and the large success burning blood transformation, if his body hadn't been tempered by the 9 revolution body refining fruit and become extremely powerful, if he hadn't used the undying sword intent and the power of rules, if he hadn't used the earth-shaking technique, if his sword technique hadn't reached an unfathomable level, and if he hadn't used a defensive technique, he probably would have been killed already. Even though Xiao Chen was not dead yet, the web between his thumb and index finger on his right hand was torn. His bones were aching, and his muscles felt like they were being torn apart. Just moving slightly would cause him to feel a tearing pain. Fortunately, he had refined the wood avatar's origin energy. Waves of tyrannical life force swept through his entire body. His injured parts immediately felt a cooling sensation as they rapidly recovered. Sword domain. If I had grasped sword domain, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. I might even be able to put up a fight. Chu Mu thought to himself as he controlled his vitality to speed up his body's recovery. Fortunately, he had the wood avatar's origin energy. Otherwise, with such a heavy injury, it would be enough to make him lose his battle strength and become a spectator. He might even die from the shockwaves. After several dozen breaths, Chu Mu felt that he had more or less recovered. His right hand grabbed at the air, and the Frenzy Thunder sacred sword that had fallen to the side flew up. Glancing at it, Chu Mu couldn't help but feel pity. There was a gap on the Frenzy Thunder sacred sword. It was almost cut in half. This Frenzy Thunder sacred sword couldn't be used anymore, so he could only put it away. He took out 5 low-rank sacred swords from his interspatial ring and held one in his right hand. His left hand's fingers were like swords as he chanted. The words he spat out caused the air to ripple. After several dozen breaths, his left hand's sword fingers pointed at the 4 low-rank sacred swords. In an instant, the 4 low-rank sacred swords trembled and left their scabbards. They turned into 3 different colored sword light: gold, green, purple, and blue. With their fastest speed, they shot towards the Emperor-rank sword chi spirit not far away. The 4 different colored sword light, under the control of Chu Mu's left hand's sword fingers, were very agile. They spread out and locked onto the Emperor-rank sword chi spirit, attacking from 4 different directions. From the time Chu Mu was sent flying by the sword of Gojoseon to the time he used flying heaven sword controlling technique, less than 60 breaths had passed. However, 60 to 70 sword of Gojoseon had died under the Emperor-rank sword chi spirit's chi swords. It was almost 1 death per breath. This was Chu Mu's first time using flying heaven sword controlling technique in a real battle. There were 2 difficulties in cultivating flying heaven sword controlling technique. The first was deshang and the second was multitasking. This was because flying heaven sword controlling technique could control multiple swords at the same time. Chu Mu's soul was powerful, so he could multitask before. It wasn't hard for him to control 4 flying swords at the same time. The sword light tore through the air and instantly passed over the sword of Gojoseon. It shot towards the Emperor-rank sword chi spirit and directly hit it. Chapter 1039. Like cutting a cake, the 4 different colored sword light sliced the space around the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi into 4 pieces. They passed by the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi's body, causing slivers of yuan chi to dissipate. Chu Mu was shocked. The 4 flying swords had indeed struck the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi, but the effect wasn't as good as he had imagined. The Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi's body was extremely strong. The flying swords that had been infused with a type of rule power weren't enough to heavily injure it. However, this was the first time the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi had been injured other than when the sword of Gojoseon self-destructed. Its icy cold eyes pierced through the air and landed on Chu Mu's body. Its sharp and cold gaze was like a sword light, causing Chu Mu's body to involuntarily tremble. After killing a low-level sword of Gojoseon with 1 slash, the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi charged towards Chu Mu like a hot knife through butter. It wanted to kill this human who had survived its attack and dared to attack it. The cold intent locked onto its body, and the threat of death descended upon it once again. "Protect Chu Mu!" A high-level sword of Gojoseon roared. The 13 high-level sword of Gojoseon all charged towards the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi and slashed out with their strongest slashes. They could tell that Chu Mu's imperial sword technique could cause damage to the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi. As for why Chu Mu's imperial sword technique could control 4 flying swords at the same time, it wasn't the time to think about it yet. The explosion of the 13 high-level sword of Gojoseon did indeed stop the Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi's advance. The Emperor-rank spirit of sword chi's every slash was extremely powerful, but it couldn't kill any of the high-level sword of Gojoseon with 1 slash. Chu Mu's danger of death was temporarily averted. He once again controlled 4 sword light and linked them together. Like a sword snake, it shot towards the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit. The defensive sword technique once again struck the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit. This time, the 4 flying swords struck the same spot consecutively, immediately causing even more damage to the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit. The amount of yuan chi that leaked out increased by several times. "All right, continue attacking." The sword of Gojoseon's eyes lit up, as if they had seen a glimmer of hope for victory. The darkness in their hearts dissipated a little, and they became even more spirited. "Kill, kill, kill!" The group attack was even more powerful. The Emperor-rank sword aura spirit immediately suffered many attacks. Many parts of its body emitted yuan chi. Although it didn't hurt, it angered the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. For the first time, the Emperor rank sword aura spirit opened its mouth and let out an inhuman roar. Like a devil, it was mournful and powerful. The roar turned into rolling sound waves that carried terrifying power and instantly spread outward. The visible sound waves carried a faint four-colored glow. These sound waves actually contained traces of the power of four laws, causing the sound waves' power to multiply. The sword of Gojosian were all hit by the sound wave. Their faces all changed as they were blown back. Their bodies trembled as their blood boiled. Their muscles and bones felt numb, as if they were about to shatter. The demonic sound pierced through their brains, causing them incomparable pain. Blood seeped out of the corners of their eyes, mouths, and ears. It was extremely terrifying. Chu Mu's flying sword light was also on the verge of collapse under the impact of the sound waves. The light on them faded and their power weakened. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit exploded. Shwa shwa shwa, the sword aura in its hand instantly slashed out hundreds of times. The sword aura tore through the sky. The sword aura's speed and power were clearly amplified under the sword domain. The sword aura was even more powerful. With one explosion, hundreds of sword of Gojosian were struck. They were either sliced in half or split in the middle. Blood splattered everywhere as broken corpses fell. The hellish scene greatly angered the other sword of Gojosian. It was too terrifying. It was an undefeatable monster. With just one sword, it killed hundreds of sword of Gojosian. What could they use to fight back? In an instant, many sword of Gojosian felt the shadow in their hearts grow. Being shrouded by death, they felt despair again and even lost the will to fight back. They became dead souls under the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's sword. The prelude to death was playing. Facing this Emperor rank sword of Gojosian, the present sword of Gojosian were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Even the 13 high stage sword of Gojosian were injured, spitting out blood with pale faces. No one could fight against it. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit was like an Asura, slaughtering all living things. At this point, thousands of sword of Gojosian had already died under the Emperor rank sword of Gojosian's sword aura. The ground was littered with corpses and fresh blood was like a lake. The thick smell of blood constantly stimulated the sword of Gojosian's nerves. Some sword of Gojosian became delirious and muddle-headed. In this hellish bloody slaughterhouse, the sword of Gojosian, who were about the same strength as it, couldn't even take a single sword strike before being killed. The bloody scene appeared in front of its eyes as if it was foreshadowing its fate. When a person knew that their death was near, most of them would lose their will to fight and wait for death to descend. Without resistance, the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's slaughter was even easier. Batch after batch of sword of Gojosian died. There were only a few hundred sword of Gojosian left alive. If this continued, it would be a complete wipeout. Chu Mu didn't lose his will to fight. He was one of the few sword of Gojosian that didn't lose his will to fight. At this moment, it was also the time to show the strength of a sword of Gojosian's will. Although he didn't lose his will to fight, he didn't even have the chance to escape from such a powerful and terrifying Emperor rank sword aura spirit's sword realm. One sword. Just one sword and the Emperor rank sword aura spirit would be able to kill him. Looks like I can only use my final trump card. Chu Mu sighed to himself. His final trump card was the 3 Heavenly Desolation Sword Intense that the 3rd Palace Master of the Heaven Wasteland Earth Palace had given him. The 3 Heavenly Desolation Sword Intense were extremely precious and wouldn't be used easily. However, in this situation, he had no choice but to use them. Otherwise, if he was killed, the 3 Heavenly Desolation Sword Intense would lose their support and dissipate. However, Chu Mu also knew that even though his cultivation had reached the 2nd sky of creation realm, his divine thought power had greatly increased, and his control over the Heavenly Desolation Sword Intense was much better than before. he was still clearly suppressed in the sword realm of the sword aura spirit. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit was extremely fast, and with the amplification of the sword realm, it was extremely difficult to hit it. Once he couldn't hit it, the Emperor rank sword aura spirit would definitely defend with all its might. It would be impossible to hit it after that. As his thoughts raced, Chu-Mu had an idea. This would require him to take the risk. If he didn't grasp it well, he would become a ghost under the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's sword. On the contrary, if he grasped the right timing, there was at least a 70% chance of killing the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. Success or failure would depend on this one move. Taking a deep breath, Chu-Mu's eyes shone with an extremely sharp light and were filled with determination. He had no other choice but to be killed or to kill his opponent. At this moment, the 13 high-rank sword of Gojoseon were sent flying. They spat out mouthfuls of blood again and looked dispirited. They were all heavily injured and found it difficult to even get up. As for the other sword of Gojoseon, none of them could withstand a single strike from the sword aura spirit and died one after another. Concentrating his thoughts, he communicated with the saint-rank heavenly desolation sword intent in his mental world. Putting away the 4 flying swords, Chu-Mu charged towards the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. The other sword of Gojoseon were afraid that they wouldn't be able to dodge in time, but Chu-Mu charged towards it instead. This scene shocked many people. No matter who it was, the Emperor rank sword aura spirit wouldn't show mercy. It raised its sword and slashed towards Chu-Mu, who was already close to it. In an instant, Chu-Mu used the heavenly desolation sword intent and placed it in front of him. The moment the heavenly desolation sword intent appeared, the sword of Gojoseon present felt a terrifying aura enveloping them. It was as if they could feel the passage of time and endless vicissitudes of life filling their bodies. Each and every one of them trembled and became absent-minded, unable to control themselves. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit's body also trembled. Its cold eyes revealed other emotions for the first time: fear. The terrifying sword domain also began to tremble. The heavenly desolation sword intent shattered and enveloped Chu-Mu's entire body. The sword aura slashed onto it and suddenly trembled. It was bounced back by an extremely powerful force. The terrifying force caused the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's body to stiffen for a moment, unable to move. What Chu-Mu wanted was this opportunity. The second heavenly desolation sword intent appeared. Without the slightest hesitation, it shot out. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit's eyes flashed with fear and anger. It struggled, but because it was bounced back by the heavenly desolation sword intent, its body stiffened for a moment. Because it was locked onto by the heavenly desolation sword intent, it was unable to break free and react. It could only watch as the heavenly desolation sword intent shot towards its head. Its complicated eyes revealed despair, just like the sword of Gojoseon that it had previously slashed. The saint-rank heavenly desolation sword intent's terrifying power was not something the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit could resist. Even if its strength was 10 times stronger, it would still be useless, unless it was infinitely close to the saint rank or even the saint rank. There was no if, no luck. In less than a 10,000th of a second, the heavenly desolation sword intent had struck the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit's head and exploded. The terrifying power of the heavenly desolation sword intent, the corrosive power of the heavenly desolation sword intent, and the changing power of the heavenly desolation sword intent instantly engulfed the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit's body. In just an instant, not even a blink of an eye, the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit's body rapidly disintegrated. Like snow melting, it silently disappeared into nothingness, as if it had never appeared. As the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit disappeared, the terrifying sword domain that enveloped the sword of Gojoseon also disappeared at the same time. Just as Chu-Mu let out a sigh of relief, a dot of light suddenly shot out from where the Emperor-rank sword aura spirit disappeared. It shot towards Chu Mu's abdomen and directly entered Chu Mu's body. It was so fast that even Chu Mu didn't detect it, let alone the remaining sword of Gojoseon. Of the 2,000 or so sword of Gojoseon, more than 1,500 had died under the Emperor rank sword Aura Spirit's sword. In the end, only 500 had survived. Furthermore, all of them had pale faces, listless expressions, and weak auras. They still hadn't recovered from their shock. After being ravaged and massacred by the Emperor rank sword Aura Spirit, all of them were greatly affected. Just as their hearts were in despair, suddenly, a huge change occurred. The powerful Emperor rank sword Aura Spirit was killed. Chapter 1040. Dead. The Emperor level sword Chi Spirit was finally dead. This terrifying devil was like a nightmare in everyone's hearts. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river, dyeing the ground red. Broken limbs and broken bodies were shocking and disgusting. It was like a slaughterhouse. It took a long time for the living Sword Kings to regain their senses. However, each and every one of them still had a look of lingering fear. Their faces were pale as they looked at the broken limbs and pools of blood all over the ground. Then, they all looked at Chu Mu with even more fear. Although it was only for a moment, they all saw that Chu Mu had killed the Emperor-level sword Chi Spirit. They were sure that it wasn't Chu Mu's strength. If Chu Mu had that kind of strength, he wouldn't have been able to enter the true energy secret realm. Thus, that was a trump card that was hidden very deeply. Everyone present was a sword of Gojoseon. They could feel that it was sword intent. It was an elemental sword intent that had reached the saint level. Saint level sword intent. As soon as these words appeared in their minds, they were suppressed like a mountain, causing their consciousness to almost collapse. This meant that there was at least a middle-level sword saint behind Chu Mu. Moreover, he was highly valued by that middle-level sword saint. Otherwise, that middle-level sword saint wouldn't have left at least 2 saint-level sword intents in Chu Mu's mind. One had to know that if a sword saint gave someone a saint-level sword intent, it was equivalent to cutting their own sword intent. Firstly, it was very painful. Secondly, the damage was very obvious. It would take a long time to recover. Now, they couldn't be sure if Chu Mu still had a saint-level sword intent. They couldn't make any wild guesses. Especially now, every sword of Gojoseon had used a secret technique and taken a pill. After the duration was over, the side effects appeared. They were also heavily injured. Their strength was less than 10% of their usual. However, Chu Mu looked much better than them. If he had evil intentions, the consequences, just thinking about it made them shudder. Why don't we recover from our injuries first? An advanced sword of Gojoseon said. He was no longer as arrogant as before. When he spoke, he even looked at Chu Mu, as if asking for Chu Mu's opinion. The other advanced sword of Gojoseon did not say anything. Chu Mu was surprised, but then he nodded. He roughly knew what these high-level sword of Gojoseon were thinking. He also needed to recover, so he naturally wouldn't refuse. The remaining 500 or so sword of Gojoseon sat down cross-legged, took out various pills, and began to cultivate. 1 supreme-grade True Yuan tree and 8 upper-grade True Yuan trees were undamaged. Because of the previous battle, the True Yuan trees and True Yuan fruits were not affected by the sword realm of the Emperor-level sword Chi Spirit. 2 hours later, the sword of Gojoseon opened their eyes. Chu Mu's injuries had long been completely healed by the life force of the wood form origin. He had also taken the blood yang pill to recover his essence blood. His divine sense had also mostly recovered. Now, he was almost back to his usual peak state. On the other hand, the other Sword Kings all had side effects after using secret techniques and taking pills. Especially when the 2 of them were stacked, the side effects were even stronger. After that, they were also heavily injured. 2 hours wasn't enough for them to completely recover. At most, they would be able to recover around 60%. However, they would be able to move freely. Other than the 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon, Most of the surviving Sword of Gojosian were intermediate Sword of Gojosian. A few of them were low Sword of Gojosian. Chu Mu and Bawang were undoubtedly the two most eye-catching ones. Especially Chu Mu, he was the center of attention. "Thank you, Brother Chu, for saving our lives." An advanced Sword of Gojosian cupped his hands towards Chu Mu and said. Facing Chu Mu, the arrogance in his heart disappeared. Indeed, they were advanced Sword of Gojosian. Chu Mu was only a 2-star Sword of Gojosian. But here, in a one-on-one battle, they were at most 50 to 60% of their strength. They might not be Chu Mu's match. Outside, they were stronger than Chu Mu. Don't forget that Chu Mu had the protection of at least an intermediate Sword Saint behind him. Moreover, it was the kind of intermediate Sword Saint that could split off his own Saint-level sword intent to protect him. Whoever killed Chu Mu would have to suffer the wrath of that unknown intermediate Sword Saint. Looking at everything, Chu Mu had the qualifications to be on equal footing with them. Moreover, they were able to survive because Chu Mu had used 2 Saint-level sword intents to kill the Emperor-level sword Chi Spirit. Chu Mu's loss was huge. The other Sword of Gojosian also expressed their gratitude towards Chu Mu. Every Sword of Gojosian had grown through countless battles and slaughters. After their minds recovered, the broken limbs in front of them were no longer in their eyes. Let's begin to distribute the true energy fruits. A high-tier Sword of Gojosian said as his gaze fell on the true energy tree. The other Sword of Gojosian also became excited. Originally, there were more than 2,000 Sword of Gojosian. After distributing the true energy fruits, they didn't get much. Now that there were only 500 left, they would get even more. However, the low-tier Sword of Gojosian were all gloomy. Brother Chu, how do you think the true energy fruits should be distributed? A high-tier Sword of Gojosian looked at Chu Mu and asked. Originally, Chu Mu would at most get some high-rank true energy fruits, but the current situation was different. Let's pick the true energy fruits first, then discuss the distribution. Chu Mu thought and said, "Well, let's follow Brother Chu's idea. Then, let's ask Brother Chu to pick the true energy fruit." The high-tier Sword of Gojosian said, "What do you think? We can rest assured that Brother Chu will do it." Perhaps under other circumstances, they wouldn't agree, but now they were all grateful and in awe of Chu Mu, so they thought so. Chu Mu didn't refuse. His figure flashed and rushed to the true energy tree. He first passed the high-rank true energy tree and came to the peak-rank true energy tree without any danger. Holding a sharp sword in each hand, he continuously slashed out like a storm. One peak-rank true energy fruit after another was cut off by Chu Mu's sword light. Then, wrapped in the power of divine sense, they floated to the side, allowing the other Sword of Gojosian to see clearly. In fact, even if Chu Mu took 1 or 2 peak-rank true energy fruits, no one would say anything. However, Chu Mu disdained to do so. After picking the peak-rank true energy fruits, it was time to pick the high-rank true energy fruit. The connection between the true energy fruits and the tree branches was very tough. The power of divine sense couldn't pick them at all. Chu Mu's speed was extremely fast. In less than half a quarter of an hour, all the true energy fruits on the 8 high-rank true energy trees were picked clean. The true energy fruits were wrapped in Chu Mu's divine sense and divided into 2 piles, one big and one small. They were the peak-rank true energy fruits and the high-rank true energy fruit. Carrying the 2 piles of true energy fruits, Chu Mu flew to the front of the crowd. He swept out his sword and cleared out an empty space for the true energy fruits to fall. There are a total of 3,783 peak-rank true energy fruit. Chu Mu said to the crowd, "There are a total of 19,330 high-rank true energy fruit. How do you think we should distribute them? How about this? I have a suggestion." A high-ranked Sword of Gojosian spoke up. He looked around and his gaze fell on Chu Mu's face. Originally, the 13 of us would each get 3,783 peak rank true energy fruits, and then each of us would get 1,000 high rank true energy fruit. Now we have to change it. Brother Chu is also qualified to share the peak rank true energy fruits equally. I have no objections. Many of the high-ranked Sword of Gojosian expressed that they would not be ungrateful. They would treat it as repayment to Chu Mu. Even if 2 or 3 of them were unhappy, it was useless to object. Instead, they would be seen through, so they might as well acquiesce. Those mid-ranked Sword of Gojosian and low-ranked Sword of Gojosian naturally did not have any objections. In fact, they did not dare to dream about the peak rank true energy fruit. As for the high rank true energy fruits, each of us 14 will get 500 high rank true energy fruit. The remaining 12,000 will be divided among you. The mid-ranked Sword of Gojosian will get more, and the low-ranked Sword of Gojosian will get less. In addition, the spatial rings of the more than 1,000 dead Sword of Gojosian will not be taken by the 14 of us. They will be divided equally among you. After speaking in one breath, he looked at Chu Mu. Brother Chu, what do you think? All right. Chu Mu did not refute. The spatial rings of the other Sword of Gojosian might have some good things. However, the high-ranked Sword of Gojosian would not be interested in them. Chu Mu was also dispensable. On the other hand, the high-ranked true energy fruits were more important. With this distribution, the dissatisfaction of those mid-ranked and low-ranked Sword of Gojosian dissipated. Although they did not obtain many high-ranked true energy fruits, each person could obtain at least 3 spatial rings of the Sword of Gojosian, expanding their wealth. No one objected. The distribution principle was thus established. Chu Mu finally obtained 273 peak rank true energy fruits and 250 high rank true energy fruit. The other high-ranked Sword of Gojosian took the initiative to distribute the 3 extra peak rank true energy fruits to Shaochen. Although he did not obtain a single spatial ring, the value of the peak rank true energy fruits and the high rank true energy fruits was immeasurable. Every Sword of Gojosian obtained something. Furthermore, it was something that surpassed what they obtained before the appearance of the Emperor rank Sword Chi Spirit. This made them very happy. They were also very glad that they were able to survive and obtain these fruits instead of becoming the severed limbs on the ground. At this point, everything of value in the True Essence Hall had been swept clean by everyone. It was a pity that there were no Spirit Garden pearls. Otherwise, they could have transplanted the True Essence trees. The next time they wanted to obtain True Energy fruits, they would have to wait for the next opening of the True Essence Secret Realm. That would be another 100 years later. 100 years was actually not a short time. No one knew what it would be like in 100 years. Grasping the present was the most important thing. More than 2,000 people had entered the True Essence Hall. In the end, only 500 people had survived. The difference was huge. However, when they thought about how they had encountered the Emperor rank Sword Chi Spirit, they rejoiced. In history, the Sword of Gojosian that had encountered the Emperor rank Sword Chi Spirit had all been annihilated. A whistling sound rang out, and a storm appeared in the back hall of the True Essence Hall. Then, a spatial door appeared once again. The Sword of Gojosian glanced at the back of the hall that was filled with broken corpses and blood. They did not even look back as they stepped into the spatial door. They swore that they did not want to enter a second time. The Emperor rank Sword Chi Spirit had left a deep impression on them.